President Core.
All right, thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 10:02, and wonder if I could get a roll call. Sean?
Thank you, Dr. Core. So Dr. Core,
Present.
Superintendent Moore, here. Member Catanese, here. Member Clark,
Here.
Dr. Clay,
Here.
Dr. Hagerman, here. Member Haley,
Here.
Member Kravickas,
Here.
Member Myerson,
Here.
Dr. Robbins,
Present.
Dr. Core, you have a quorum.
Fantastic. And I think before we get to some of the more ceremonial parts, which I'm looking forward to, we will have presentation of candidates and election for officers for the State Board of Ed. Want to tee that up for us, Executive Director Ross?
Thanks, Dr. Core. Members, item 1 on today's agenda is the presentation of candidates and election of state board officers for 2023. This morning, the nominating committee of Member Catanese, Dr. Hagerman, and Myerson met and prepared a slate of candidates for this board to take action on as item number 1. The slate prepared by those members have Dr. Core serving as president and Member Haley as vice president. Members, you may also nominate individuals for these positions from the floor. Do any members have any recommendations for the board leadership positions at this time? Hearing none, members in person will be receiving a paper ballot. Members who are on Zoom received an email from Jessica this morning with a Google form. Both the paper ballot and Google form allow for individuals to answer other members for both of these positions. If members so choose. Please take a moment to complete your ballots. Please sign your ballots once they are complete. And those ballots are in front of you. And one more ballot, Jessica. Thanks, Jessica. Once you are done, you can fold your ballot and place it in front of you. That way we know you're complete. Come around and collect them. Members having reviewed the ballot, the board's leadership for the 2023 calendar year will be Dr. Core for president and Member Haley for vice president. President Core, I will turn the meeting over to you for item number 2, business reports.
Thank you very much, and I certainly appreciate the confidence of my colleagues to sit in this role. And on behalf of certainly myself, I appreciate Member Haley stepping forward and agreeing to serve as vice president. I'm working under the assumption the pay is same.
Next item, agenda.
Well, a couple of things, and you know, a new year, and certainly a new superintendent. I'll chat about that in a second. But someone not here on the board is someone that I will be forever grateful for her partnership and leadership and strong, steady hand during her service on this board. Someone who unfailingly kept students at the center of our thoughts and conversations, was always someone to listen, to share her thoughts respectfully and professionally, and I just always felt tremendous comfort having Member Christine Burton on my left-hand side, sitting in this chair, just work through some difficult issues. And again, always kept the students of the state of Arizona at the center of her thoughts and actions. And it is with just great appreciation and admiration that I have a token in recognition of her service, both on this board, and certainly I now count her as a friend. So I'd like to ask Christine Burton to step forward and receive a little token of our appreciation. Jessica, where do you want us to sit?
Okay, picture of you too.
Yeah, where do you want to sit?
Right with the board behind you.
Okay, board.
Yes.
Okay, it's too heavy.
Awesome.
Thank you, thank you. Just a few. Just a few, it's dark in here. It's a good thing I'm not. New glasses. President Carr, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn. It's an honor to be here, and serving on this Board of Education the past 5 years has been an honor and a privilege, and I am especially honored to work with each of you. This is a fantastic board. I feel like Arizona's in a good place with all of you on this board. But my time has given me invaluable knowledge and experience that I will continue in my future philanthropic work. So I don't really see this as a goodbye. I think it's my hope that I'll collaborate with each and every one of you as our foundation work really touches many of the areas that you all represent. So this is just another chapter, but I have really treasured my time on the board, and it has really been a pleasure. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Would also like to recognize, to my right, we have thrilled to welcome Superintendent Tom Horn, and just a couple of words. As soon as the election was finalized, Superintendent Horn reached out to me, as he did many members, with the desire to get to know us and certainly share his interests and his vision moving forward, as well as get to know each of us and where our experience has taken us, and certainly look forward to at least 4 years of working very closely with you, Superintendent. I know you'll have a report here a little bit where you can share your thoughts, and then it's not just Superintendent Horn who's new. Just thrilled to be able to welcome Sean Ross is our new Executive Director. Of course, he was approved at our December board meeting, but now is in the seat. And boy, we've had numerous opportunities to interact over the last couple of weeks, where we have a speed dial relationship established already, and Sean has hit the ground running, and is being just capably assisted. Is the Deputy Director, Aaron Wonders, has joined us. Also, your first meeting here. So just look forward to working with both you gentlemen, and again, keeping the focus on the students of Arizona. I think we'll do great things together. So that concludes my report, and would ask the superintendent if he has a report that he'd like to share.
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate Dr. Kaur. When we met, I was overwhelmingly impressed, and I think we'll have a very good relationship. I look forward to it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I should just say, in recognition of the open meeting law, I limited myself to contacting no more than 4 other members. But as time goes on, and there's no longer an issue of talking about the same issues, I hope to have one-on-one meetings with all members of the board. I think the relationship between the superintendent and the board is my highest priority of all. And I will put in whatever time is necessary to have a good relationship with all of the members and with the board as a whole. I thought in this first meeting, it would be a good idea for me to talk about my other priorities after my first priority of having a good relationship with the board. And so I will talk about those and I'll be as concise as I can, but so that I don't scare anybody, I want to let everybody know in future meetings I'll be more concise than I'll be today. But I think there's a fair amount to say, and I'll say it as concisely as I can. First of all, some of you know that when I'm not in public service, I'm a lawyer. So I'm going to tell you a little story about lawyers. A lawyer, a engineer, and a doctor got into an argument about which of those three belonged to the oldest profession. So the doctor said, well, God made Eve out of a rib of Adam, and that was the first surgery. So medicine is the oldest of these professions. And the engineer said, yes, but God created the universe out of the chaos, and that was a great work of engineering. So engineering is the oldest profession. And the lawyer said, well, who do you think created the chaos? In our school system, we have a number of really outstanding educators, including several people that sit on this board. And whatever I say about the system as a whole, I want to pay tribute to those really dedicated educators that we have throughout our system and those that sit on the board. But looking at the schools as a whole, the situation, I must tell you, is pretty grim right now. I had friends who, when I announced I was running for superintendent again, said to me, Tom, you used to be attorney general, you're going backwards. And I said, no, the big problem's in the schools, and that's really what I want to work on. The test scores show that 2/3 of our students are not proficient in math, and 60% are not proficient in reading. And that is a real crisis. And everything we do is going to be aimed at correcting that crisis, because students that are not proficient in math and reading are not going to be able to compete in the economy. So my first priority of all is going to be, and let me say, it's not all due to COVID, because even the year before COVID, the proficiency rates were 41% and 41%. So almost 60% of students were not proficient in math or reading the year before. And that's compared to back in the dark ages when I was superintendent, we had 65% proficient in reading and 65% proficient in math and 70% proficient in reading. And we've got to get back to those kinds of numbers. And that is the overwhelming priority. I see my job as alerting the community to the emergency that we have and the urgency that we address that with every ounce that we have of energy. With the help of my transition team, we adopted a mission statement. And our mission statement is that the superintendent, the Department of Education will be primarily a service agency dedicated to raising academic outcomes and empowering parents. That is our mission statement, and everything we do will be geared to those three things. So I want to say a few words about each of those. First of all, the helping function. When I was superintendent, we had improvement teams that would visit the schools to help them. A consultant that specializes in failing schools has written me a letter saying that the schools haven't had any help in years. What they have is what they call paperwork hell, where they get long questionnaires and they're gone over by people in improvement section, and it goes back and forth. And by the time they get money, sometimes it's almost too late to do anything with it. We are switching the focus back to the helping function. That our improvement teams, we've been recruiting outstanding teachers and administrators, and we have some already in the department, some new ones that we've recruited, and we're going to be dedicated. Any schools that are not doing well, we're going to send very talented people out to help them improve. And so that's priority number one. Now, if the schools, despite the help, do not improve and they're still failing, the statute provides that the state can take them over, and that would be, on my recommendation, that would be subject to a vote of this board. Again, when I was superintendent before, we did that from time to time. An example was the Roosevelt School District, but that's an example of something interesting that happened, which was as soon as we scheduled a meeting of the board to consider takeover, the test scores went up. We got their attention, and so we need to hold the districts. We need to first of all help the districts, but secondly, we need to hold them accountable that they are focusing on academics. Now, of the 50 state superintendents, the one that impressed me the most, and I thought was the most intelligent superintendent, was from Ohio. And she taught me something important. She said there are 3 elements to an outstanding education. Number 1, the quality of teachers and teacher leaders. Number 2, the quality of the curriculum. And number 3, the motivation of the students. Very often we forget about that crucial third factor. And it's not fair to hold teachers and districts accountable without the students also having an incentive to do well. And so I have two approaches to that, which I hope to renew. One of them was to inspire the best students to aim not just at proficiency, but at excellence. When I was in the legislature in the 1990s, I was already worried that we have proficiency obsession in this country, and we don't aim enough at excellence. And I wrote a bill that passed that said that a student who passed 3 state tests, not just proficient but excellent, would get tuition-free college at our state universities. That was not enforced until I became superintendent and got a seat on the Board of Regents, and I lobbied for it and we implemented it. We had some pushback from the presidents of the universities who wanted all the scholarships to be on their discretion. We were only 13% of their scholarship. But problem with discretionary scholarships is it doesn't let people know what's expected, so it doesn't motivate anything. This program motivated excellence because students didn't want to have to pay tuition. I guarantee you their parents didn't want to have to pay tuition. And so as a member of the Board of Regents. But then when I left, there was no one there to lobby as hard as I did, and it was taken away. So as a member of the Board of Regents, I will be pushing to restore that. The other half of it were the students who would not study unless they had a good incentive to do so. And a bill was passed under Lisa Graham-Keegan that students would not graduate from high school unless they passed a statewide test. Both she and Malera, my 2 predecessors, did not enforce that. I was the first one to enforce it. And it was a great motivator for students who otherwise would not study, that they knew they would not get a diploma unless they passed the test. And it was structured so that there's nobody I know of, that if there were any, there were very few that didn't get their diploma. It was a great motivation for them to study so that they could pass the test and graduate. So that'll be a legislative priority for me to bring that back. Now, what I really want to talk about is in focusing on academics throughout the system is to talk about the distractions from academics that I think have played a major role in the test scores decline. And the first one is social emotional learning. My heroes are math teachers love math, history teachers love history, and so on. Some of them have to complain to me that they want to teach the subjects bell to bell because they love their subjects, but they can't because administrators are forcing them to play what they refer to me as dumb games when it should be learning time. And the same has happened with teachers. The teachers come a week early. In the old days, they would study data to figure out what to do with each student, to see where the weaknesses were. Now they show up and they sit around a table and talk about if you were an animal, what animal would you be, and things like that. So we need to get the emphasis away from that. I agree that we should have a social worker or a counselor in every school to deal with students with multiple problems. And the teachers who want to work on that are welcome to, but I personally know teachers who don't want to. They signed up to teach their subjects, not to be psychologists. And so my highest priority in this area will be to get the focus back on academics and not have them do other things that they didn't sign up to do. I've received reports even that when teachers want to fail students who didn't do their work, the administrators urged on them something called compassionate grading, which I think is a big mistake because we need to motivate students positively, and we need to fail them if they don't do the work. And then another problem is that under social emotional learning, teachers have been discouraged from exercising discipline because it might hurt their feelings. And I want to read quickly to you a letter I got from a teacher. In many of the incidents listed, the school administration has avoided disciplining and actions of corrective measures. Typically, the student receives a snack and sodas after they're sent to the office and returns to the same classroom with the same behavior and attitude. For example, the student is given direct instruction to complete bell work and will reply F off. Now they use the actual word, not just the letter. When calling the front office, I'm instructed to use interventions such as social emotional learning and documented intervention from the restorative justice approach. Neither of those things discourages this behavior. This approach allows all students to revert to their cultural feelings rather than learning to behave, because misbehavior has no consequences. Additionally, attendance declines immediately and the performance numbers support the cultural attitudes toward learning. Students immediately begin wandering the campus, ignoring security and what they consider an achievement, posting their gang signs on walls and public quad areas. So students cannot learn in an atmosphere where other students are afraid to interfere with them. I served on a school board for 24 years. And during those 24 years, we never reversed a teacher one time on an issue of discipline. We became known as the toughest district around. Our learning went up and our test scores went up. And that's because you have to have orderly classrooms for students to be able to learn. Now, I've had some journalists say, when you talk about discipline, are you talking about physical punishment? And the answer is no, I'm totally against that. I'm talking about explosions, changes, kinds of things that get the parents' attention. I can tell you, having served, I've attended over 2,000 school board meetings in my role as member president of my school board. It gets the parents' attention, and it gets the kids to come around if there's genuine discipline. Another distraction is critical race theory. And the people who voted for me know about my opposition to critical race theory, because my volunteers and I put up 1,500 signs around the state that had my name on it and said stop critical race theory. But the reasons for that opposition are too lengthy to talk about here. So we have a handout, and after I give my report, the handout will be given to the board members and available to anyone here who wants to give extra copies, and anybody who's watching online who ask for what we will send it to them. It's a 4-page essay that I wrote on my reasons for that critical race theory. It's not only, in my opinion, long value, but interferes with that. Now, I will tell you the only significant ask that I will make of the state board is that in order to, we need tools to implement these priorities. And one that I will be requesting the board to consider is that the letter grades given to schools reflect in part whether they've adopted the values that I've talked about to emphasize academics rather than distractions. Two more very quick points. One, empower parents. I'm a supporter of ESAs because it enables people with less money to do exactly the same thing people with more money have been doing all along, and because competition makes everybody perform better. And finally, in terms of school safety, I think is very much on people's minds. People want to feel that it's safe to send their child to school. And like I have advocated for many years when we have to talk school. And my nightmare is before I have a chance to do that, somebody's going to attack a school and let me know they're there to defend the students and the staff there. In distributing school safety money, the legislation says that I would make recommendations to this board to grant money to schools, and then this board would approve or not approve those. And I've let the schools know that I favor a social worker or a counselor at every school, but the first priority must be to have a police officer at every school so the student will be safe. So these are my three big areas of priority: academics, empower parents, and keep students and staff safe. And all of those things all need to be working with the state board about them. And any board member that wants me to explain anything, I'd be very happy to do it and appreciate looking forward to working closely with the board. Thank you, President Horn.
Thank you, Superintendent Horn. I appreciate that. Next is the Executive Director report. And again, welcome Executive Director Ross and Deputy Director Wonders. A few words, Executive Director Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. Just before I begin, as a matter of process, we will be posting Superintendent Horn's handouts on the meeting materials after the meeting. Thank you for folks to review. President Ford, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, I want to come up and introduce myself. My name is Sean Ross. Prior to beginning my tenure as Executive Director, I was a middle and high school English teacher, instructional coach, and site leader for 15 years, primarily at Arizona School of the Arts, which was founded by Dr. Mark Francis, who was in the crowd. Yes, shout out to Dr. Francis. Following my time in the classroom, I worked for 8 years at the Arizona Department of Education as the Deputy Associate Superintendent of Academic Standards. My life has been defined by access to high quality education. I grew up in poverty, but my teachers recognized in me a passion for reading and learning that they took the time to foster. Because of them, I identified myself not as poor, but as a learner. And that identification led me to be the first person in my family to earn a college degree. Upon graduating, I dedicated my life to helping provide that same recognition to kids across Arizona that my teachers gave to me. It was a gift that changed the course of my life, and I wanted to give that gift to others. I am truly humbled and honored to have the opportunity to serve the board and to continue to serve the kids, families, teachers, and schools of Arizona. I'd like to now have our Deputy Director, Aaron Wonders, introduce himself as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Director Ross. President Porter, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My name is Aaron Wonders. I'm so fortunate to have been selected to join Sean as the Deputy Director of the State Board of Education. Just a little bit about my background. I spent the past 4 years in the Department of Education. I'm Deputy Associate Superintendent for Policy and Government Relations. Prior to that, I served for 8 years with the legislature, with 7 of those staff in the Education Committee in the House, as part of the majority research staff. Graduated from the University of Arizona and the flag staff. Just very excited to be here, very excited to have met all of you this past week. I'm really looking forward to being able to support you and getting the board done. Thank you.
Fantastic, and thank you, and welcome to you both. We're in good hands. With that, I'll transition. Sorry, she's ready. Oh,
Before we get too far, Superintendent Horn's handouts.
okay, very good. Thank you. Item 3, we have a call to the public. This, of course, is, thank you so much. This is the time for the public to comment on non-agendized or consent agenda items. Of course, the members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration or a decision at that date. We have public comment for the meeting that's accepted in written form, and that's posted on the board's website. Written comments are not orally read into the record at the board. So with that, Executive Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak to us today?
Dr. Cole, we had 3 requests to speak at this public. First is Rashida Ward.
There you are.
Hello, everyone. Do I just start speaking? This is my first time
Please,
being
the
here.
floor is yours, yeah.
Okay, so I am originally from Florida.
I should let you know, I'm so sorry, we'll limit your comments to 3 minutes, so just to give you that sense.
I was teaching there. I decided to relocate here to Arizona. Before I relocated, I began the process of being certified here. So I got my fingerprint clearance card. That was mailed to my home in Florida. And I also began the process of applying for certification. I read the requirements online and I was like, okay, well, I have all of these things, but I'm not sure how I'm gonna go about proving that to the state of Arizona. So when I got here, that process began and it was very lengthy. A lot of things were not clear about what it was that I was supposed to be proving or showing or how I was supposed to be doing that. So when I got my first letter of, not really denial, it was just like, this is what you need. So I called and couldn't get anybody on the phone. I showed up here, couldn't get anybody to talk to me. I was finally denied completely. And that was when I finally got somebody on the phone to speak with. And when that process happened, everything that they asked me for, I gave them. And then there was a hearing on December 8th, and they let me know that specifically what it was that I needed, which was 1 semester of substitute teaching to prove my last little bit of experience, and a course that was to teach IEPs or to show that I had knowledge in IEPs. So I've completed that process. So I just want to have, the decision to be reconsidered.
Thank you, and just to reiterate, because you've made a direct request, that would not be under the purview of the board right here. But I'm certain there are members of the department who can kind of walk you through next steps at this point.
Okay.
You could talk to Margaret, who's our chief deputy.
So next is Sadina Lemon.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Board President Core, all board members and Superintendent Horn. I'm Sadina Levin, originally from the Bronx, New York, and residing in Chandler for 6 years. I have certifications in standard adult education, substitute teaching, and expert subject matter in psychology, where I have taught in some of your most at-risk schools in the state of Arizona. But when I came here in 2016, I had employment agencies tell me, don't teach in Phoenix, teach in the East Valley, because parents in Phoenix yell, and parents in Phoenix are aggressive, and the students will curse you out. I said, that's where I want to be. And in being there, I have been successful. It is not something that I do part-time because I can't. I have a single mother of 5 children, and as you know, it doesn't pay very well. What I will say is that I have dealt with those so-called difficult parents. I have dealt with those children. And when I walk into a classroom of 30-something kids, we have boundaries in our class. And those students listen. Their parents came to parent-teacher conferences. I've had a huge turnout. And I want the same education that we give to our East Valley kids to possibly get to our Phoenix kids because they need it and their families need the support. Superintendent Horn, I am the parent that doesn't need expulsion or suspension to get my attention. I need reasonable partnership. And I fear that increasing SROs will enable administrators to wrongfully criminalize parents like myself. In September 2022, I was criminalized by Chandler School Unified District because an administrator lied on me. They stated I was rude on the phone in order to weaponize with the school's SRO because I inquired about disciplinary actions regarding my child, my Black child. The incident follows previous attempts of me requesting help from the school regarding bullying, disciplinary, and disparate treatment concerns. I was also banned from my child's choir concert as a result, and that is a moment that my family and my children can never, ever get back. While the entire CUSD board, superintendent, and executive leaders have been aware of this matter for months, CUSD has only attempted to silence me. Silence me because I am a parent with questions, and in CUSD, certain parents with questions are threatening. And in knowing the school to prison pipeline is a significant issue in America, why do the disciplinary reports provided by this district identify students as offenders? Offenders, is there not a better word? And while I will always be for all people, I will always be for all people, the only leaders who have been there for me and my family are the Black Mothers Forum. And while it is commendable, admirable, and extremely helpful to my entire family, it is unacceptable. So I'm here today because I want you to investigate CUSD's retaliatory behavior, disparate treatment, and abuse of power. And until there are some significant changes, I will be back here. Here in your face, we'll be back here. I'm not going away, and I am demanding accountability for this administrator's blatant lie, the school's retaliatory behavior, and the abuse of power used by the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Shannon Hayes.
Ms. Hayes, please go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, board president, members, and superintendent. My name is Shannon Hayes. I am a member and advocate of the Black Mothers Forum. I am an education equity advocate. What I do is, what we do in the Black Mothers Forum is advocate, assist, and support Black and brown families around the Valley who are having issues with discipline in the schools, who are having issues with bullying in the schools of their Black and brown children. But what I want to bring to you today is the fact that right now, specifically in the East Valley, there are instances of the schools in the districts utilizing trespassing as a threat, as a weapon to keep Black parents from addressing any concerns that they're having regarding their children in the schools, even after they've been called to the school for whatever reason. When they ask questions, there seems to be an issue. No one wants to be accountable. They just want to discipline students without any kind of information, due process. Nothing is happening to support the families, the Black families in our East Valley school districts. I would ask that there is a review of the policy regarding trespass in the schools, because it's not clear. And it allows the school districts to pick and choose to decide how they want to utilize trespass orders and the SROs as weapons against Black and brown parents. That is my ask of you today. You will be seeing more of me. You'll likely see me every month. You'll likely hear from me more than that. But I just wanted to introduce myself and allow you to know why I am here, what I stand for, what the Black Mothers Forum stands for, and how we will proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ford, just a matter of process. Our first speaker, Rashida Wharton, her appeal is actually in the consent agenda item G.
I'd like to speak to the three of you after the meeting if you were willing to talk to me.
Move us on to item 4, the consent agenda. We are able to take the consent agenda as a whole, unless a member would like any of these items pulled for discussion. Member Haley.
Yes, I'd like to just make a quick comment if possible on item number 4I. As I said at prior meetings, I just urged all members to watch videos on the oral history. I think it's really, really incredible and the story of speaker Toma and his family on their journey to.
Thank you, sir. Very good. The member Meyerson recusing herself as one of the items relates to your institution. Is that correct? Any other recusals?
That's going to core 4B for me.
Okay, very good. Member Hagerman with the need to recuse himself from the consent agenda item, specifically 4B. Would anyone, once again, would any member like an item pulled for conversation or discussion? Hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to approve the entire consent agenda as presented. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Haley, thank you. Vice President Haley, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Clark, thank you. Again, any conversation, comments, discussion? Hearing, seeing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. Approved as presented. I'll now move us on to our second call for the public. And as this is the time for the public to comment on items in today's general session. And consistent with our first call to the public, we will limit speakers to 3 minutes, if you would. Director Ross, have we received any requests?
Yes, Dr. Fuller, we have 5 requests in person and 3 referrals.
Fantastic.
I want to apologize in advance if I mispronounce the person's name. I'm continuing the previous executive director's long history. Trying my best with names. Up first is April Bohu. Okay. April.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
My name is April Boba. You were very good for not having practice. Thank you for your time this morning. I live in Scottsdale and my son is a first grader at Desert Canyon Elementary School. We moved here 2 years ago from Washington State. I work in tech and I've spent most of my career in that sector, although I have volunteered as an English foreign language tutor to students in the past. My family, I come from a military family. We moved all over the US and abroad. My mother taught public school for over 30 years as an elementary school teacher across multiple states. My son has flourished in public school. We feel so lucky. He is learning all of the things that a first grader should. He's learning reading, writing, math. He has access to music and art and sports in his school. He also goes to a language immersion school, so he gets access to Chinese language. And he's learning how to speak already at his tender age. He loves it. The teachers at DCES are highly experienced. They're also heavily credentialed. Many of them have a long track record of service at the school. They've been there for 10 years or more. When I say we feel lucky, I'll repeat it, we feel incredibly lucky for this public school education that we're getting. The concern I have with the ESA, with the universal expansion of vouchers, is that it feels to me like a parent that we're penalizing public schools. We're at risk of losing what makes our public schools great, our teachers and our programs. This isn't about parental choice. If it was, the legislature could very easily take initiative to fund a parental tax credit for those families who wish to go private with their children. I have no issue with parents who want to school their children as they see fit. But I do believe that the first school choice should be optimizing local public schools so that we can make that a great choice for parents. We can enable school choice without taking resources away from our public schools that are already underfunded. It's also astonishing to me personally, being in the business world, that we're writing checks to schools and new schools that have zero obligation of transparency or committed give gets.
When we talk about a competitive playing field and accountability, I'm not clear on why we would not, as part of the ESA, apply that same level of accountability to these private and charter and home schools, particularly around test scores and other results. So I would say in summary, I really hope that this body will prioritize serving the public schools that serve the 92% of Arizona's children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Cool, next we have William Franklin. Franklin.
Mr. Friend, online, maybe, no? Okay.
Okay, next we have Lupita Almanza.
Almanza? Okay.
Sarah Frechette.
We have no one online, right, Jessica?
No, we do not present.
Okay, just double check it. I keep blinking at you. I don't want to, okay. No, okay.
Dr. Mark Jornstedt.
I see Mark here. You know we have Mark. Good morning, Dr. Jordan.
Morning. Morning, President Core, Superintendent Horn, welcome. Members of the board, I'm Mark Jornstedt here today representing the Arizona School Administrators, whose 1,500 members have the privilege of working with students, parents, staff, and communities to provide safe, orderly, welcoming, effective, and collaborative environments for Arizona's 1.1 million public school children. Today, you will hear a report on educator discipline in item 6E. In maintaining secure learning spaces, educational leaders must not only protect students from external threats, but also build and nurture safe learning cultures within our schools. The evidence shows work remains to be done in this area. To quote from the Burns and Mueller report, while understanding that most educators will go their entire career without ever being disciplined by the board, the data shows there is an opportunity for misconduct prevention through ethics and scenario training. ASA stands committed to work with the board and the department to widely offer such training, especially the recommended NASD TEC course through our conferences, webinars, and meetings. We continue to regularly emphasize to our members not only the critical responsibility of reporting, but also the necessity of regular training of all our staff who work with children, all of them. Everyone who, in whatever capacity, work with students needs regularly to have this training. The other factor noted in the report is also important, and I quote, indeed, the majority of disciplined educators did not attend an educator preparation program and most likely did not receive coursework or training in ethics or professionalism. The educator shortage has increased the utilization of alternate pathways to certification. Thus, we must increasingly provide ethics and professionalism instruction to all our staff members regularly, systemically. Our commitment is to be your partner in this critical work. Children's safety isn't your responsibility. It isn't my responsibility. It's our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Does that conclude the call of the public?
We have three more speakers virtually.
Oh, please. Yeah,
First is Christy Black.
excellent.
Hello, can you all hear me all right?
You hear you just fine. Please
Wonderful. Well, good morning, and thank you, Superintendent Horn and board members for taking the time to hear our public comments. Again, my name is Christy Black. I'm a Mesa mom with 2 kids who go to Zaharis Elementary, and we have had such an incredible experience there. My kids have had very different academic and social needs from each other, and their needs have been well met. The environment at Zaharis is, as many of you know, also unique. Sorry, I have a sick kid home now. The environment at Zaharis is very unique, and They focus really highly on literacy and a love of books and reading, as well as the inquiry method of learning. I have the opportunity to help at the school regularly. I should be there now actually, but I'm home with the sick kiddo. And I'm also, I have the opportunity this year to be on the PTO as the treasurer. Zaharis really is special. But it doesn't have to be. Our school has huge community support from parents and guardians like me who are in the classroom supporting educators. The school is able to take advantage of grants and donations from Zaharis families, as well as community sponsors in our neighborhood. The PTO is even able to provide a stipend to each teacher and each grade level that they can use at their discretion on supplies and special school projects. For most of the time my kids have been in school, I've been a stay-at-home mom. Even now I work, but have flexible hours from home. I recognize being able to help with the school is truly a privilege. Many of the families in our area are able to contribute to the school with both time and support, or time or support. But most schools in Arizona do not and cannot have this level of community involvement because parents and guardians work full-time with little excess for them to donate. Students should not have a lesser education just because of their family and neighborhood circumstances. All students deserve the opportunity for a fully funded learning experience. I'm deeply concerned that every student does not receive that experience and is even less likely to receive that as vouchers are expanded without oversight. In my former life, before kids, I was an auditor, and I'm a firm believer in the value of oversight. I'm concerned that the budget cost mentioned in the legislature is going to come out of the K through 12 budget. And it just blows my mind that as a taxpayer, that both as a taxpayer, I want to know where my money is going, but also, like I said, as an auditor, I want to see that any money that we're investing, well, you would never invest blindly in a company you knew little about their ins and outs and had an approved audit report. And I don't know why we would want to invest our education dollars into any school that doesn't have good oversight and transparency. So please continue to support fully funding public schools and requiring that oversight to how our taxpayer money is spent. Each of our kiddos has such tremendous potential, and I hope we do all we can to invest in all of Arizona's children and ensure they are given equal opportunity to grow and learn and thrive. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and I hope your baby drills well quite soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, members of the board, up next is Joseph Bia.
Hello, my name is Joseph Baya. I am a school board member at the Kent Unified School District. It is located in rural Arizona, up on the Navajo Reservation. I wanted to start off by explaining that in our community on the reservation and in this public school, in this Native community, we have a unique cultural program that prides itself on bringing cultural awareness, Native Navajo cultural teachings, and Native teachers and their Native teachings that are unique to our Native community. The interesting thing here is that the students and the families in our community, they feel that this is something that's vital and important. This is one of our values in our Native community, to be able to share our culture and to share that, in the public school setting, is unique for where we're at. However, we struggle to bring in funding from various sources to provide competitive paying positions to teachers in this area because it is rural. Now, a lot of our teachers and assistants, they may not have all the different teaching degrees that they're required to have, but I know that our school district is able to bring in these traditional practitioners and these traditional teachings from our school to these students in our community. So this year we decreased much of our federal and state projects due to the looming crisis of the AEL, the aggregate expenditure limit. So we're taking a more conservative approach this year, and that's delaying and pushing back many of our needed school repairs, much of the, the maintenance and operations of our schools. We want to repair and fix a lot of things in our school to meet our school needs, But I found that recently, in addition to that, we haven't had a lot of full-time staff in our music and drama department. I found out shockingly, we don't even have a drama department right now at this time. But our kids, they want to learn how to play musical instruments. They want to learn about musical theory, but we don't have enough teachers. And at our high school, we've been trying to combine a lot of those teachings with our middle school, with aids. In Kayenta, we have our struggles, but the teachers are working hard. The school's trying to move the needle in the right direction, and the pandemic has hurt, our students' learning. Although we are still below state averages, we're recovering, and we're trying our best to hire additional staff. Now, with the ESA expansion, that's pulled much needed money away from our public school, and it doesn't provide us with an equitable solution. When I think about equity, I think about how our Native communities get a short end of the stick. And it's no different with the ESA. We're in an area of high needs. And right now, I see that ESA is benefiting a lot of the wealthier families. It does benefit private schools. And our families on the reservation, they're not sending their kids off the reservation to private schools, especially to religious schools. And cultural relevance in our Native teaching ways is so important. But in our Native community, these are draining resources away from our school, and it is providing wealthier schools and homeschools in the suburbs with additional resources that we could use in our Native community. I just wanted to share that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Dr. Core, members of the board, our last speaker is Riley Berline.
Hello, am I good to go?
You are indeed. The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Horn and the board for giving us the opportunity to talk here. Sorry, I just ran in to catch this, but I would like to say, first of all, I'm from Tucson. I'm a dad. I've got 2 kids in public school, elementary schools in Tucson Unified School District. And over the years, professionally and also, as a volunteer, I'm familiar with a lot of the schools around here, elementary, K-8, high school. My wife teaches in a K-8 school. So I just want to say, there's often negative things said about our public schools, but my experience in TUSD has been that every school is filled with professional, caring, and committed principals, administrators, teachers, who go above and beyond to do their best to make sure students have what they need to thrive. And there's a lot of emphasis on test scores and proficiency and things like that. And at the same time, a lot of the students in the schools are struggling, in life just to get by. They're often in big class sizes, and it's very challenging for the teachers to give them the attention they need. They don't have assistants and things like that. And so a big part of my point is that what I see in the schools is great. It's amazing. I love the public schools. And I love what they stand for. But at the same time, I was listening to Superintendent Horn's comments earlier about 2/3 not proficient in math, 60% not proficient in reading, that it's not due to COVID, and a big emphasis on what kinds of incentives, students need. But I think it's much clearer than that, which is Arizona is one of the most underfunded public education systems in the nation. We currently rank 47th in per pupil funding, despite the recent investments. And there's many studies in the last few years that have shown that increased funding leads to increased student success. So I would like Superintendent Horn and the board to really think about how much we invest in our future, in our kids, in our schools, to provide equitable opportunities for success. And especially with this current voucher that was just passed, and how that might siphon even more money away from schools that are already underfunded. I just would like to say, imagine what we could achieve with that funding especially when we already achieve a lot with very little to nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Appreciate that.
Dr. Core, there are no further speakers.
Fantastic. And now we'll move us on to item 6 and moving into the general session. 6A is for information only, but we'll have a presentation and discussion of the Move On When Reading K-3 program and to include a discussion of the annual Move On When Reading report.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, with us today is Dr. Amy Boza from the Arizona Department of Education. She is the Director of English Language Arts and Move On When Reading.
Fantastic. Welcome, Dr. Boza.
Thank you.
Floor is yours.
President Core, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board, thank you for having me today. I'm Dr. Amy Boza, and I am the leader of the amazing ELA team, the English Language Arts team at ADE. We are a team of 7 who work together to facilitate and support Move On When Reading, which is our legislation. Go ahead. Move On When Reading, or MOUR, as we call it, encompasses 3 major pieces of legislation that guide all of the work that we do. These are ARS 15701, 15704, and 15211. This legislation guides early literacy practices across the state and encompasses all aspects of literacy, from assessment to curriculum to professional development, the whole gamut of literacy progress. MOUR requirements impact more than 1,300 schools in 455 LEAs across the state. So every school that teaches kinder through 3rd grade students is impacted by MOUR. If the MOUR legislation includes a multi-step process that essentially is a conversation between us, my team, and the LEAs. Each year, each of those schools submits a literacy plan to the state, along with data submissions for us to review. The team reviews these submissions and provides feedback. Once the plan has been thoroughly reviewed and all questions answered, the LEA is added to the SPE list for approval and to signal funding from school finance. That is the list that you receive monthly for approval. All plans were due October 1st, and at this time, all plans have been reviewed, and there are only 8, as of when I last checked, pending. That the slide says 19. So as we work these past few weeks, we're still getting those finished up. 8 pending follow-up information from PLA. So if we have a question, we reach out, we ask them to respond. They provide us that additional information. Sometimes that goes back and forth a couple of times before we're able to approve. And those 8 are listed, and it might be fewer now, but the 8 listed are at the bottom of this month's list, and so you can see who those are. When we are in the review process, we use a multi-page rubric, and those are actually screenshots of that rubric. Feedback is provided that aligns with each of the elements within the literacy plan and data submission. So each of those boxes is something that's required of the LEA. If something is missing or more information is needed, we reach out directly to the LEA and they provide that for us. This is not the only communication, of course, that we have with LEAs, as we support them throughout the year and as they put their plan into motion. So this is their plan, this is what they're supposed to do for the year, and then we support them throughout the year as they put the plans into action, as they provide professional development, as they make curricular selection. All of those processes, we support them in that. Additionally, we support vendors who have tools and products to sell in their understanding of what our state law requires of them, and also any RFI processes. In recent years, literacy has been a focus of legislation, and there have been some requirements for particular trainings and assessments and different things. And so that RFI process, we guide vendors through that as well. So one of those pieces of legislation does require universal literacy and dyslexia screener. Schools provide, through an RFI process, we were able to select and choose 10 products that meet the criteria. Schools choose one of those tools to use to assess their students 3 times per year. And then they report those numbers to us those 3 times a year. You can see those listed here. The screenshot is kind of, little difficult to see, but essentially this is how we see their data. It's aggregated by those 3 proficiency levels. And so for each of their grade levels, they tell us how their students did on those literacy screeners. So what you've seen is a little glimpse of what the current portal looks like for data submission. I didn't show you any of the other pieces, but a new portal is in the works. Last year, the board recommended, and the previous administration agreed that a portal reimagination was needed. That process has begun. We've been working for a little while now on that, and we've been meeting with the IT team to kind of lay out what's required of legislation, what do we currently have in place, and a reimagination is in the works. Our goal is to better align literacy plans with continuous improvement processes that may already be in place. So if schools already have a continuous improvement plan with a literacy goal attached to that, it makes sense for their Mauer literacy plan to reflect that, as opposed to here's our continuous improvement plan, our literacy goal, and way over here is our Mauer literacy plan. So we're just trying to align those things. The new portal will look and feel better, hopefully a little more user-friendly on both ends for the submitters and for us as reviewers. And we'll have the ability to can handle current needs, but also future needs for changes in different things like capturing student data as those requests become made. So in addition to supporting Mauer legislation and those related needs, the ELA team provides a plethora of learning opportunities and technical support. So while that legislation encompasses all aspects of literacy learning, my team does the support for that as well. The Move On When Reading documents, the guidance documents are updated every year to provide current information. Technical support includes webinars, phone calls, individual virtual calls, and more to provide specific report. On any given day, we will have, actually, I think I have one tomorrow, a support call with an LEA just to work through whatever's going on in the district. We also create videos for both Mauer support and other trainings. We house all of those on our YouTube channel. So all of the documents that we have a video support. So any superintendent or person working through their Mauer process has video support. We have launched a Reading Fundamentals On-Demand Academy, and it provides free asynchronous learning opportunities for educators, well, and really anyone. So all of you are welcome to take an on-demand course if you choose. Each requires about 5 hours and a passing score on the knowledge inventory. We have districts that are actually using these as part of their professional learning plan. And we're really, really thrilled and excited that they are doing that. We have plans to continue to build out the on-demand academy so that teachers who need their K-5 endorsement, which is another piece of legislation, will have support in that way. Equally exciting and well received are our book studies. There are currently 3 in progress. Meet weekly to discuss topics presented in the text. And then book studies reoccur every 3 months with different titles. And finally, office hours is where we invite district personnel to join us to share what's going on in their district, for us to share what's happening, recent happenings, and then they share any questions they might have. I'm super proud of the work that my team does. They work through all the literacy plans and provide all kinds of professional development, and customer service is our focus. And so they respond to emails and phone calls within 24 hours and just are amazing people. Finally, this is our literacy/ELA web pages. We invite you to visit our web pages. We strive to make certain that our websites are robust and full of information. At any time, you can click and learn more about what we do and offerings we have in place. And then this is just a little quick screenshot in case you can't find where those are. You click on the ADE homepage, the blue Review Academic Standards button, and then this red literacy bucket pops up and all of our links are there. And This one, I thank you very much for your time, to provide this little glimpse into the Mauer review process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Was any comments or questions or concerns from the board? Member Krivik, please.
Thank you, Dr. Rosa. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
We've been wanting to hear this for quite some time. As you know, this is an agenda item for us every month, is the approval of those reports.
Sure.
Just forewarning you, I have kind of a lot of questions.
Okay, I'll do my best, and anything I don't know, then we'll figure it out.
Thanks. So my first big one is, for what reasons can an application be denied? So in other words, if the curriculum and materials adopted don't meet legislative requirements, are they still denied? Because I know, and I read through the slides and stuff on your website, and I know it's a delicate balance between the local control of adopting their curriculum, but yet there are legislative requirements. Can you walk me through that?
Sure. So there are different types of curriculum. First, there's tier 1 or core reading. And that's the bulk of the reading experience. And then there's tier 2 and tier 3, which are intervention materials. So your core reading materials and your intervention materials have 2 different criteria in legislation. The core materials have 3 components. They need to teach the standards. They need to teach the elements of reading that are clearly defined by law, which is the big 5 of reading, and oral and written language, including spelling and handwriting. And then it also has a third element, which is meeting an ESSA verification, which essentially means that not only do I have research behind my product, I know it works with kids. And so I've done research studies on my product to see what a statistical significance is in students gaining knowledge and gaining progress in using my tool. And so those 3 elements. We have vetted lots of products that are out there, not all of them, of course, but and we have vetted them to see if they meet those 3 criteria as best we could. If a school, say I choose that I'm not going to use anything on that list, I have Amy's awesome program and I'm going to use it. Well, through this literacy plan review process, we see Amy's awesome program and see that it's not been vetted. And we don't know, so we ask questions. Can vendors send us, like, who's the vendor contact? Can we meet with them? We meet with the vendor and say, in Arizona, there are these 3 criteria. Can you provide us those documents to show a standards alignment, to show us that you're meeting the reading, the elements of reading, and your ESSA verification? And so we'll work. Sometimes it takes a year or so. You know, research doesn't happen overnight, and so. But to get that school approved to use Amy's awesome program, there needs to be a research plan in place and like a plan to say, this is when we'll get you this document, this document, this document. We anticipate it being approved by here. When we have schools in that situation, we tell them to, hey, you might want to consider a plan B, because if it continues that they don't have this rating or don't meet the standards, then we would highly encourage you to choose another product so that you can continue to be approved and receive funds.
So I've seen that really cool document you guys have on your website called the green, yellow, red document, which is super helpful. So if they adopt a red, like thank you for explaining, like if they're thinking about something that's new on the market, I get that. Yes. But what if they adopt something that's clearly in the red? I'm using that just to make it simple. Clearly in the red, do they still get funded? Do they still move to us? And because we don't see any of that. That's partly why I'm asking. Sure. So you've seen that. You probably put that report together for us. You know, we don't see that. So that's why I've had questions and almost discomfort, because I don't know that they're all the same.
Yes. So we definitely start with a coaching conversation. You know, we're not just going to be the mean 80 ELA team who's coming to whatever. It's going to be a coaching conversation first. Let me talk to the vendor. We had many vendors who've been downright angry with me and us because we haven't approved. We kept them in the red and they didn't want to be in the red. Well, this is what the law requires. So you can do what's required of the law, or you stay in red and people are aware. So we really start with a coaching conversation, and then if the vendor's not going to move, because really the onus is on the vendor. The LEAs don't. We're providing that information, the red, yellow, green chart, as a first layer of decision making for them to kind of help them in that process. But the vendor should know what the laws are, and their product should meet the requirements of the law. So if the vendor is not willing to move, then the coaching conversation shifts a bit to where we are encouraging them to try what was your plan B? We talked about a plan B a while ago, so what is your plan B and what is the plan to implement that or make another selection? So we do kind of ratchet up the coaching conversation so that LEAs do change. And honestly, most of them are, I would say probably close to 98% are open and receptive to using something that meets legislation. There are not many who, and oftentimes the ones who are kind of, this is my product, is somebody who's created their own product and wants to use that. It's a little more difficult.
So my point is that they can basically adopt I'm using just the color code,
Sure.
a red, and still get funded then.
For a short while until the coaching conversation. So this year, perhaps we've conditionally approved you. So we use that often. We conditionally approve you, provided that you meet with us monthly and give us updates on the plan, the research plan, when you anticipate to have those things completed. And then by the end of this year, if it's not finished, then next year your approval is in jeopardy.
Clearly, I can only speak for myself, but I think that would be good information for us to see.
Okay.
To know if they're adopting curriculum that don't meet the criteria.
Sure.
Quite simply, the red. My second question / thought is, I've seen a lot over the years, and I'm sure you all, especially in the audience, know more than I did. Often schools adopt new programs and new curriculum, but the old ones don't go away. And that's what I've heard even on some of the podcasts that we've all learned is, so I mean, every school I've ever met over all these years say, oh, our reading program is research-based, but they still have old components of old programs. And so how do we get rid of the old, so to speak? In other words, they're still using strategies like the infamous 3Qing, right? Even though they've adopted this green, using the color green curriculum, they've gotten training, professional development, but there's still those underlying components. How do we get those out? I don't know how to ask that question any other way.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have a specific answer. We continue to try to vet those old things, but there are like some of those old things. Vendors have even said, we're not supporting that product anymore, so please don't add it to your list. So there have been those kinds of conversations as well. Getting it from school buildings and out of people's hands who, I've used this thing for 20 years and I really love it, might be a little bit more difficult. And I honestly am not quite sure. Definitely open to brainstorm and think about it. But I'm not sure how we make a trade instead of an and, kind of thing.
Let's one more question. I'll open up to other board members. Although I have more, but one more while we're in that section. Under the assessment section, how do we know that all assessments are accessible to all learners, which is required in federal law? And it's something that I've already said in meetings I'd like to get adopted in rule. Federal law requires that any assessment adopted at the district or given at the district level has to be accessible to all learners, even students with significant cognitive disabilities. Are we currently making any check on that?
The only legislative piece that we have is the requirement for the universal literacy and dyslexia screener selection, not necessarily, and the data reporting. That middle piece of implementation is really left to LEAs.
Other Superintendent Horn, please go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you, Amy, for your presentation. I listened very intently to your presentation about this really exciting program. And I look forward to talking to you further when we get a chance. I do want to alert my fellow board members to the work we're doing in this area, because some of it may come to the board, and one of my goals is not to have any surprises, but to let people know in advance what may be coming later. And that is that my understanding of move on reading was motivated by legislators not wanting social promotion to result in illiterate students going on to fourth grade where they would face failure the rest of their careers. Nothing risky to a student in that. And that the program has not been succeeding to the extent it really should, because districts have been given too much discretion to move students to fourth grade, even though they have not shown that they're literate. And so this may require legislation, or it might require interpretations of legislation and board rule that would come to this board. I just want to let everyone that we're working hard on that. Thank you.
Member Clark, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mozart, for your presentation. I think all the board members know that learning disabilities, the ESA program, dyslexia, all those things are very important to me. And I also have 3 children who are diagnosed with dyslexia. So I just wanted to draw attention to a few different things. I just have a few questions for you, also to kind of help my board members see some areas that I think we have potential opportunities for improvement or attention on in the future. So my first question is kind of related to all the dyslexia screening, all those wonderful things we have in place right now that have happened over the last few years. How does a parent who has their child in the Arizona public school system, how do they know that their child has dyslexia?
So that is through child study type processes on campuses. And so there could be some interventions in place, and it might even start with a flag on that screener to say, there might be some characteristics here, and we might want to dig deeper. And so let's do some interventions to our diagnostic tool that will kind of pinpoint specific skills, and then try those out in an intervention type system, and then work to, if things aren't making progress, then work to child study team. And if still progress isn't being made, then further down that path for evaluation and based on what the team decides. And then that would move into sort of ESS type exceptional student services roles in diagnosing. There's quite a plethora of cognitive assessments and processes that like a school psychologist or an outside psychologist or educational psychologist provides to make that diagnosis. Classroom teachers, based on a 3-minute screening tool, would not make that diagnosis.
So if a parent goes through, I thank you for that answer. So if a parent goes through the whole screening process, and then even at the end of that process, the child ends up through the child find process, gets referred, there's a review of existing data meeting, they decide to do all those evaluations that you mentioned. At the end of that process, is the school able to diagnose or put on the paperwork that that child has dyslexia?
Yes, in 2014, actually, the federal government put out a notice that said you're allowed to say dyslexia. It often falls under another category, reading disability.
This is what I'm getting to.
Yes.
So on the IEP, it will say, correct me if I'm wrong, specific learning disability of reading, but that presently that a parent cannot get a diagnosis of dyslexia in an Arizona public school system because that is not on the IEP, correct or no?
So we're treading water into an area that's not my own. And so I'm gonna offer something.
I'm putting you on the spot, I'm sorry.
And us are not overlapping Venn diagrams. We work, maybe bubble touch kind of thing, but we are not overlapping at all. It's 2 separate worlds. And so that would be specific to the language included in IEPs and that kind of thing. And I'm not 100% sure, but I do know what you're talking about specific language disability, and it is listed as a subcategory. I'm not sure how all of that works. It's better to ask an expert in that field, let ESS run.
Yes, I definitely think in the future, because I've asked for that before, that would be a great presentation. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because I want to alert other board members that there is a lot of really fantastic conversation that's happening around dyslexia. There's all these, screenings, there's, structured literacy, all the new stuff that's happening is very exciting. One of my, positions here is just like a public member as a parent. I work with a lot of families in my regular job, and a constant source of tension is, hey, my child's been identified, they've been screened, but I don't actually know if this is dyslexia. Nobody's calling it that on the IEP. Nobody's saying that's what it is, or there's a barrier to getting an actual evaluation and getting an actual IEP in place. And that was kind of related to one of my questions, is that we see the numbers like on the slide, not going to make you do math, I promise, where that like 12% of these, 1,700 students are at significant risk. But we don't know if those students after that 3rd screening that are significant risk, correct me if I'm wrong, actually end up getting an IEP because they've been identified with a learning disability. So I would think that throughout that process, we would see more students getting IEPs, because through the screening, we're actually identifying more students that have dyslexia. But we don't see that particular piece, right? Like, did the screening process actually increase IEPs?
So I don't have that data. However, there are a couple of things. Just because a student might be identified as having dyslexia doesn't mean they need an individualized education plan. So just, it's not a one-to-one kind of scenario. You can receive interventions and support. And we would hope that this would happen for any student who has a reading struggle, even if it's identified or not as dyslexia, in that intervention process, so we can limit the gap. And that's the great thing about Mauer, is that the focus is on the K-2 space, really targeted intervention before we even get to third grade retention, that we focus on that so that our students who show any signs get the support. And as far as the correlation or the consistency between screener and IEP process, I would worry that it would be a one-to-one correspondence, because sometimes there are false positives or false negatives, and we would want to use the screener as it's a 3-minute thing, and only 1 or 2 of the measures in that 3 minutes are related to dyslexia screening. So I would worry that would be enough information to make sure if that was true dyslexia or the student was struggling.
And I actually agree with you, and I might have miscommunicated. I actually think that part of my concern is like, oh, we're screening everybody, so we're good. When in reality, I wonder if we may be seeing less students actually getting identified, evaluated through the school psychologist, child find process, getting an actual diagnosis, and then actually receiving an IEP to receive actual dyslexia remediation services. We know that 1 in 5 kids has dyslexia. We know that our reading scores are not what we would hope them to be in this state. So my hope is that, through these screening processes, we're actually doing the early intervention for some of those kids who maybe needed early intervention, but they don't actually have a diagnosis. But that the result of that is we're seeing those numbers rise, because now we're seeing those kids, we're identifying them, they're going through that process, they're getting IEPs, something that a parent can have in their hand, hold the school accountable to the curriculum and all those different types of things. So that's kind of where I was going with that. And then the only kind, and making sure that the board understands that I don't think that there's a place on the IEP for dyslexia, but we can look into that and dig into that more later. And then the only other thing is, I noticed that handbooks, there's a few different handbooks that Arizona has that you had links on here for related to dyslexia, which is awesome, great first step. Some of those I think are just fantastic. Too, there's the dyslexia resource guide for families, and then there's the Arizona Dyslexia Handbook. I do think there could be some opportunity for folks that care about this issue to work together to make some updates and improvements on that. When I look through the dyslexia resource guide, I've been in this process with the school district 3 different times now. I'm like, gee, I'm reading through this, and this does not sound like the process that I went through. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to continue to educate the average parent in layman's language. Did you know that the school can deny your request to evaluate your child? People don't know that. They think that the school is going to identify the child, do an evaluation, they're going to get a diagnosis, they've got their move on their reading plan, and they're good to go. The school can deny that. And some of these handbooks, they don't empower parents in the way that I hope they would. And then, please do. Yeah,
just to ease your mind.
Yeah.
We are actually in the process of updating the dyslexia handbook because it is better. So we will be reaching out to different members of the community to come together.
Yeah, I'm like, there's a fun little section that could be like this long on this side. And the only other thing on that note that I would mention is in the Arizona Dyslexia Handbook, that's the much longer one that's not as pretty designed and it's more specific, which is great. One of the things that I just noticed as a parent who has children with dyslexia, a lot of what we struggle with is we're not experts. We know something's wrong, but we don't know how to fix it. We are not trained in structured literacy, reading instruction, all those things, and we know that. And so even as I'm reading the parent section in that handbook, I'm like, oh, this is telling me all the things that I need to do as a parent. I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. I think that we could look at that, and that may not be, there might be opportunities to have a better approach, because if I know our schools are amazing, we've got all this money going in for dyslexia. What I don't want is parents to think, oh, this is my problem to solve. because they're telling me I should be practicing rhyming words with my kids. I should be doing this. I don't know. I'm not a dyslexia expert. I didn't go to school for that. I know now because I've been trained in Barton reading and spelling for that because I had to learn it for my child. But any ways that we can empower the parents. One of the things I was even thinking is sample IEPs. The difference in, and we heard it earlier today, the difference between school districts and what a child with dyslexia has on their IEP is shocking. I've seen districts say 30 minutes is of psych word support is enough for a child for dyslexia once a week. And then I've seen other districts say, oh, no, that child needs 4 days a week, 30 minutes a day of structured, intense instruction for this period of time. And a parent goes, well, which one is it? The school I love and trust is telling me my kid only needs 30 minutes. But my friend told me the school over here, wherever, is getting more. So we could maybe look at some of those opportunities too, for those public facing documents that you're talking about updating.
Member Clark, any other thoughts or questions? Yeah, Member Kravickas, please.
Thank you. To Member Clark's points, I wanted to make a couple. One, sample IEPs on everything, amen, yes. And you brought up something that I wouldn't have brought up before, but I'm glad you did. I know we, in good intent, try to always like, here are parent resources. As also a mother of 2 kids with disabilities, it is so overwhelming. And I'm gonna be frank, it just makes me feel like a bad mom. It's a never ending list of everything I'm supposed to be doing, whether it's coming from my therapist, whether it's coming from the school, whether it's coming from the doctor. So just sometimes bear that in mind when you're writing it, because it's hard when we're working, we have other kids. All of this conversation, we had been wrestling prior with the previous director about what is a proper role for the special education advisory panel, which in statute is supposed to advise and consult with the board. And it's federally created as well. And I was a previous member, and it's half parents, but it's also got charter school representatives, school. I feel like these are the perfect topics for CF to be developing, to look at what other states are doing, what other sample IEPs are there, how can we update, what are the best handbooks out there? So there's a lot of other issues, but I think all of this would be a really good one for CF to be tackling for us. And I have another question with that. Is that okay?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. What is yours?
Can we talk about the changes in higher ed that you reference in the book? And hey, please, if this is wrong, I thought I heard from somebody who was telling me about the big grant that we got in partnership with Read On Arizona, that one of the projects is that maybe our colleges of higher ed will develop common courses, which to me seems like a really brilliant idea. And I don't know if that's true. And what kinds of things can we have higher ed do besides always saying training, but real structural policy, systemic things that we could do or are doing,
So we are working with IHEs for sure. Some recent legislation, the K-5 literacy endorsement, has actually spurred a lot of action outside of the CLSD grant, CLSD Comprehensive State Literacy Development Grant. We're in our 3rd year of that. That work, some of the outcomes for that was related to coordinating with IHEs, not necessarily perhaps for like common courses, but similar expectations. And that K-5 endorsement requirement really added to the list, I suppose, of what is expected from that coursework. So that has helped incredibly to have that, because then schools are training teachers who come through their program with this level of expectation. That's much about structured literacy and the big 5 plus oral written languages, handwriting. So I don't know that there's a common thing, except that the requirements that we work through and worked with the certification team so that they can empower EPPs, educator prep programs, to make certain that they're meeting that criteria. And I would say the way that we continue to do that is continue to hold high expectations so that those pieces are being met.
Oh, well, Mr. President, members, I'm thinking that as we also start thinking about educator prep and application reform, as we talked about our retreat, something that we might do that spot. Sorry. Anyway, now I want to talk about the reports. Okay, so there's a lot of great information about everything that the department is doing, as well as Read on Arizona and everybody. Personally, I would love to see more, as much, if not more, data analysis. It was probably only like 10 to 20% data. There's no disaggregated data by subgroup. I personally, and the board knows, at the state level at least, like to see students with disabilities broken out by the 13 categories. To Member Clark's point, the way we might evaluate the students who are in SLD might prompt different conversations and policy solutions than the kids who are in the visual or hearing impaired. So I think I'd like to see way bigger data analysis. I would love to see, like, what are the scores of the schools that are doing the best, right? So I mean, just lots of different data analysis. And to that point, and maybe something we can also add to the rule, as I know we discussed opening up this rule at the last meeting. What happened to the students who've been exempted? You know, to Superintendent Horn's point, I think it's like, what, less than 40% in 22 were proficient? I don't remember the number, but only 0.8% were retained. I'm not necessarily advocating for more retention. I know that's controversial, but that's a big chunk of kids in between there that we don't know whatever happened to them. Did they ever learn to read? Can we do some kind of growth analysis to see how they ended up doing? And to that point, how many were exempted by categories? Like there's the 4, and you put them in the report, like IEP, ELL. I would love to see that data. To me, that would also be super informative. Again, to Superintendent Horn's comments, how many of them were based on school discretion? How many were because they had an IEP? But again, I just feel really strongly that, I mean, we all know the research on 3rd grade reading, how critical it is, but every kid should learn to read no matter how, that's my new tagline, no matter how long it takes. I mean, my daughter with a significant disability is a strong reader. Was she reading by 3rd grade? Absolutely not. She is now. So every kid should learn to read no matter how long it takes. I'd love to see a really great data analysis, and maybe it's a partnership opportunity with the Helios and the ASU Decision Center to partner with some of that stuff, because we've had Mold Mauer for over 10 years now. So I think it's a really good time. Let's do a 10-year look back.
Thank you, Member. Any other thoughts or questions? Thank you, Dr. Post. I appreciate your reporting today.
Thank you.
We'll work through 6B and then maybe take a quick break. So, but we will knock out 6B if that's right with everyone. That speaks to opening rulemaking, presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2602.02 Arizona Teacher Leader Professional Standards. Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have with us Bruce Planky from the Arizona Department of Education to give a brief presentation on.
Planky, please.
Good morning. Superintendent Horn, President Corr, members of the board. It's my pleasure today to briefly talk about the development of the teacher leader professional standards in the timeline. Next slide, please. So why teacher leader professional standards? To establish a foundation for the field expectations and a common language around teacher leadership, to serve as guidance and design of professional learning, professional growth programs, potentially even credentialing. You know, we talk about sometimes micro credentials, and so sometimes teachers want to designate that expertise on their certificate, and so some guidance around that, and to help define the role and expectations for teachers serving in their schools. Next slide, please. So the origin of the standards come out of the model standards, slow down a little bit, which were released by the Leadership Exploratory Consortium in 2011. And they prompted discussion on enhanced roles and professional opportunities for teachers to allow for capacity building while continuing to take part in instruction in classroom, because we know teachers, some don't elect their career path to go into administration. They want to take a leadership role on their site and be involved. The standards were designed, those national standards were designed as guidance for state and local education agencies, preparation providers, educational organizations to develop educator workforce growth opportunities and career development programs and roles and pathways. Next slide, please. So the passage of the Arizona Beginning Teacher Induction Program Standards in 2021, this board reviewed those and approved those for guidance for the field, which includes mentoring and induction support, raised the need to define teacher leadership for the state and provide a common understanding and a level of programming amongst educational organizations throughout the state. There's a need to identify the teacher leader role and strategies that support educators in developing the knowledge and skills necessary for retention, capacity expansion, and school improvement. We know that teachers serve in various leadership roles, including mentoring and coaches. They provide support and guidance for common foundation of teacher leadership. And these serve to encourage or support LEAs in the field in developing some ideas such as differentiated pay for these folks, position descriptions, expectations for the role, even down to possibly evaluation for folks serving in this role. Next slide, please. The Arizona Student Support and School Safety Fund establishes new funds for Arizona school districts and charter schools and includes a requirement that 10% of these funds minus administrative costs. Sorry, money.
You're doing it.
Be used for the purposes of providing mentoring and retention programming for new classroom teachers to increase retention. The legislation also requires the board to prescribe the form and formatting of the mentoring and retention programming. And in April 2021, this board approved R72601-01, the induction support standards for new teachers. That approval raised the need to define teacher leadership in the state and provide a common understanding of the level of programming. And similarly, there's a need to identify the role of teacher leaders and strategies that support new teachers. Next slide, please. The teacher leader professional standards were designed for school systems to alignment to the national standards. The hope is to provide a resource to address the unique needs of Arizona educators and school systems, and to support the enhancement of the career continuum for teachers. The Arizona standards were designed by a committee of educators, school system leaders, higher ed representatives, and stakeholders from educational agencies and organizations. They all came together with some members of the educator recruitment and retention team to work to take the national standards and review them and put them in the Arizona context. In the fall of 2020 to December of 2020, a final draft for external review. They met during that time, and a draft was created for external review starting in January 2021. They met monthly to review the drafts, incorporate input, and continue the development, and kept cycling through to evaluate and revise. That committee developed practical, relevant, and evidence-based standards that drew upon research and professional expertise. Lots of discussion there. And next slide, please. This is more on the timeline. I would like to point out, I just kind of covered a little bit of that, but we actually went out through multiple rounds to select the committee. We did all calls. We had to cold call. You know, it's one thing to throw something out and get them there and get folks participating. And then that committee put that in the local context, put it in the Arizona context, and we went out through several rounds. I remember having discussions with the team in 2021 that I don't think we heard enough feedback. So committee members were asked to loop out and touch their networks. They were sent out. Recruitment retention team at all of their presentations highlighted these. We aligned in specific presentations at the conference, as well as other organizations around recruitment and retention, to try to get as many people to view these and provide feedback as possible around the state. I asked the team again, I said, we didn't get a ton of feedback, or people thought it was great and didn't think that they needed to provide us feedback. And so we engaged in that again in 2022. So we're going to the board, we just got to do our due diligence. So, you know, again, the standards committee members shared with their own networks, staff shared with statewide events, conference sessions. We did a professional development session around it. ADE council committee members and their networks and reached out to alphabet groups. We did teacher table talk events and got it in the hands of anybody attending those. Education agencies were asked to push it out to their folks. And then we additionally even reached out to other states that were sort of engaged in this work and let them provide feedback so we can do a state comparison. Next slide, please. These are the domains, and I know you've received the kind of the PDF version of it, and I'm sure reviewed that. What I wanted to point out, not to just read the titles, but what I wanted to point out is that I kind of did a little bit of a dive and crosswalk these between, to the administrative standards, the PSEL standards. And so it seems to me that this is a nice bridge between teacher standards, which are what teachers should know and do, and then we have administrative standards, what administrators should know and be able to do. And this kind of bridges that gap and puts it in a teacher context. But every one of these domains aligns to one, if not more, PSEL standards. Next slide, please. So path to teacher leadership will vary. Stages of teacher leadership may be achieved through hands-on experience training and professional development, coursework, additional certification, or degree attainment, or a combination of all above. So the vision is that the field can use this as guidance, a target. Folks developing professional development around this can check their professional development curriculum and plan against this document as well as the national. Next slide, please. So the recommendation is that you open board rulemaking, and we look forward to going through the rulemaking process in which we get more feedback and work to incorporate that into the document.
All right, thank you so much. Sit back and see if we have any questions. But first, I would ask, do I have a motion to open rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2-602.02 Arizona Teacher Leader Professional Standards? Do I have such a motion? Dr. Clay, thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Oh, boy, that's tough. That was tough, but no, I thought I heard you. Maybe my right. You go with member Katney by a whisker. Now that I have a motion and a second, any questions or comments or conversation? I see you reaching for your microphone, Dr. Clay. I'll let you start, and then member Haley.
I was going to say good morning or good afternoon. I had to figure out which one we're at. This afternoon. I have two questions. First question, you had stated that you've been talking with other organizations across the state. My concern is that I am a county superintendent of Cochise County, and I've never been approached with this. And I believe a lot of my peers have not either. County superintendents, we have the landscape, and our finger is on the pulse of our community, from public, private, prison, detention center, homeschool. We're across the gambit. We're not just one demographics of students. We're everybody across the board. So my concern is anytime you have anything new like this and you say that you've talked to these people, the first thing I'm going to say is, I haven't heard anything. And then what I do, I go back to my meetings with all my superintendents, which I have once a month across the board, and my educational leaders, and I'll ask them, who has done this? Who? And sometimes I get an answer, sometimes I don't. But I think we need to do better at communicating anything like this, anything that we do, because I think the biggest problem we have in Arizona is communication. And it's because it's not your fault, but we need to have a better plan on how to get information across the board so that you can get not just a 270-degree view on what's going on in this state. We need a 360-degree, and anything that we're missing makes what we do flawed. So I would really like you to try and purposely build time with the county superintendents, because we have the finger on the pulse, and we can also talk to our education leaders and get these surveys or whatever you need out to the schools, all the way to the smallest, to the biggest school. We have a bigger landscape. We have our finger on the pulse. That's one thing. The second one is, I like this. This is an amazing and wonderful thing, because one of my other responsibilities, I also teach in university, and we teach administrators at the master's level. Are you getting with the post-secondary to make sure that we are putting that in our curriculum somehow, so that we're all singing the same song and we have the words to the song? All of us. So that's the question.
Sure. Superintendent Horn, President for members, thank you for the feedback. I know I've had discussions with my new leadership on the certification side of things and making much more stronger connections with county leadership. And so I think anything that we do in the future, that's a great suggestion, and put that as part of the plan. And secondly, on the ed prep side, over my years since 2015, it's when we make rule changes, it's always that chicken or the egg kind of conversation. If they're doing it and then we react and make rule, or do we make rule and then they'll start to do it? And so I think this is one of those opportunities where we were focused on guidance to the field and providing a resource, and that we could certainly loop back. I know we've got ed prep quarterlies coming up where we communicate with ed prep programs in all of their formats and make them aware. We had higher ed on the design and review committee, but purposefully, to your point, look at ed prep programs and make them aware and how they can loop in. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. In the future, please use your county superintendents. We have meetings once a quarter. In fact, we're going to have a meeting in a couple of weeks. Go ahead and use us so that we can get all these great ideas out to the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Member Hayden.
Yes, just building on the same comment that Dr. Clay made. I appreciated you described a little bit about the process by which you took to select and solicit feedback from various stakeholders. And looking through at least the names of the committee members, I noticed that there wasn't charter school representation. It didn't seem like rural schools were heavily. I didn't see tribal, although I could have been mistaken. I also didn't see our correctional representation. And also the references of certain states. I know a number of states have done a pretty great job in building their future talent pipeline. And I just hope that going forward that we would be more proactive in reaching individuals that are not usual suspects. So thank you.
Member Myerson, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and I am so of the belief that this is critical work, and both retaining our highest performing teachers as well as ensuring that they don't need to leave the profession or become an assistant principal or a principal in order to stay within education. So really excited to follow this. And I know this is not the final set of domains, but very, very much that's the purpose of this. I just wanted to understand a little bit more. I didn't see sort of student outcomes specifically, and obviously we know that the greatest determinant of a student both getting out of poverty as well as closing down the gap is the quality of the classroom. And so just kind of curious how you're thinking about student outcomes and how that came about at all in sort of the early conversation as we think of the data.
Superintendent Horn, President, board members, and Member Myerson, read today. I think that if I would tap dance a little bit here, is that the mentoring induction standards directly relate to student outcomes. And this is more focused on the workforce piece of this. And so again, it's the knows and do's of what a teacher leader to relate, that peer coaching, the set of things that another adult needs to move another adult along when they're not their supervisor. And so I think there's that, but again, I think this is the guidance for the systems to develop a structure around that. And so, I alluded to a little bit about, these could be used to guide evaluation. I don't know how many systems have a teacher leader evaluation document. They have a teacher evaluation and an administrator evaluation, but what about that middle ground? And so I think that this can guide that work. Kind of as a tangential to this, those mentoring induction standards that we approved, we've partnered with some external folks too to start developing toolkits around that and collections of resources. And I can say that I can see the same thing happening here. I think one of the pieces of feedback I got back was about the media and safety that the board is. And I just thought would be, I think that's kind of alluded to in the standards, but would be a great kind of addition of resources and toolkits. And so we could also talk, again, explore some of those other states that have some trailblazers that have put teacher leader into effect in their state and see what they have around that and bring that into the resources as a big package as well. So I don't know if I kind of danced and weaved to that, but that's I think my vision or the vision of the folks that were involved with this, rather than trying to wrestle with an exact line to this group of students and their outcomes based on the coaching you did. Probably a little, I think heavy for this document, but certainly would should be part of the system.
Other question? We have a motion and a second, and hearing no other additional comments. All in favor of opening rulemaking, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
President Core, I didn't get Dr. Robbins' vote on that. Would you be able to?
Absolutely. I can certainly prompt Dr. Robbins. I'm sorry, Dr. Robbins, we're going to put you on the spot. We'd like your the motion is to approve opening rulemaking on this teacher leader prep. Do you support that?
Right.
Thank you. And thank you, Jessica. With that, my second vent to you the morning has prompted the need for us to take a break at this point. We're like right at noon, so if I could ask that we be back at 12:15, and we'll pick up the agenda where we left off from there. Dr. Robbins, I think you're going to leave us at this point, so wish you all the best and bear down.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, Dr. Robbins.
prime time, so I would reconvene our meeting at 12:16, and we'll move us on to general session agenda item 6C. This refers to the presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking procedures of ABC Article 15, which has to do with the empowerment scholarship accounts. Do I have such a motion to close rulemaking procedures for AAC Article 15 empowerment scholarship accounts?
So moved.
Member Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Clay, thank you so much. Now some discussion. Superintendent Horn.
Mr. President, I would like to propose put it on the table an amendment to postpone this item until the next meeting. And I have staff here so we can explain the reasons for that. And so hopefully if you let me, I'll ask them the question and answer it.
Okay, very good. And who would you like to come address this, Superintendent Horn?
Christina.
Good afternoon.
My name is Christina Crusoe. I'm the new ESA director, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. If you want.
Yes, could you explain, please, the reason that we're proposing putting this off until the next meeting?
Right. Today we are proposing to put this off and postpone it for 1 month until your next meeting. Superintendent Horton and I started 14 business days ago, and looking over the rules and all the work that you put into it. There's a section that we want to just talk about when it comes to the allowables and disallowable list. That particular section needs to be looked at a little bit further. I know that wasn't a question that was open in this rulemaking process. It's been a rule, but we need to look into it further before we close rules for a longer period of time. One of the most important things to mention about that is that we want the program, the goal of the program is to be more inclusive, to make sure that the lists are comprehensive. What was on the list before on the website only had very select things on the list. And so account holders or parents wanting to be part of the program self-selected out of not being part of the program because they look at the allowable list and said, oh, I don't need any of those things. And we want to be able to focus on things that are academic, that are educational, that we can have something that is more aligned with the law so that we're not just putting random items that one individual family would need. So let it be more open to everyone. And so that it's also not exploited in a way. So people would think, what are all these strange things that are on here that are being possibly approved now when there are millions of items that are educational, for example, something as simple as books or paper or pencils that aren't on there. So if we want to make it very large, that's one thing. It's another thing to say, here's how it aligns to the law, and parents should have the opportunity to be able to buy reasonable education related expenses with their ESA dollars. So that's the reason why we're proposing to put off a month to be able to really look at that and work with your staff to be able to see more into that role.
And it's your thought that work would be done in the next month?
Yes, sir.
Executive Director Russ, just a clarifying question. Is there any legislative or statutory requirement that we act on this today? Is there any timeline that we need to be aware of?
So Dr. Tor, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, the one consideration would be that in rule, the handbook is due to the board for review on March 1st. So now it's due from departments, so if the department feels comfortable, then that would just be the one concern. Okay, thank you.
And I'm very comfortable with that. And hearing the comments about parents' resources today makes me smile because currently we have a 79-page handbook with the ESA program. And I have one that's put together, it's about 30 pages, the last portion of what we need to do is get your account holder feedback and work with us back to be able to make sure we're not missing anything. And it's a lot more user friendly so that it would be better for parents. I'm confident in a month we can do both.
So we have a motion to close rulemaking, but then an amendment to keep open. I'd love to solicit board members' thoughts on those options.
Yeah.
Member Clark?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'd love to speak. I will say I'm quite frustrated at this possibility of an amendment. I wasn't notified prior to this that there were any issues or concerns from the department. Rulemaking has been open for, how long has it been open for, Dr. Ross?
Towards the board member Clark, I believe. October.
Since October, okay. Yeah, so it's been open since October. I guess I feel that through all of the intense work that the staff has done, through all the public open sessions that we've had, none of these other additional issues have been brought up. Specifically related to the allowable list. One thing I think it's important for members to know is that the rules are there to illuminate the statute. They do not have to be exhaustive lists of anything. I prefer actually leaving as much as I can up to the Department of Education as it relates to various aspects of the program. So that's my perspective. I would like to close rulemaking. I don't think there's a problem closing rulemaking today, given the significant amount of time, feedback that we've received from hundreds and hundreds of ESA parents at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, Superintendent Horn.
I'd like to say to Member Clark and Mr. President, we've only been there 2 weeks. This has been my first chance to alert you to things that may be coming up, which I did with respect to. And we found sufficient efficiency there. I think it's more important to get it right and to do it fast. Not fast from your standpoint, but fast from our standpoint because we got there. And I think, let me just ask Christine, first of all, did you find that there were grants made for non-academic purposes under the prior practices?
There were expenses made that were approved that were non-educational.
And is it your intent to eliminate that so that the only expenses approved are for academic purposes?
Yes, for educational purposes only. And that's the reason why we're doing it.
And would you have anything else to say to Member Clark?
Yes, thank you so much. I absolutely love that you're talking about illuminating the law because I agree with it 100%. This entire program needs to be aligned to the law. So if it's the intention of the board to not have an exhaustive list of every educational item you could spend with ESA funds, wonderful. It's not the way I understand staff has communicated that the law, that the rule is written. And so if that's the intention, I'm happy to follow that. And I don't think there needs to be any delay because we can definitely keep the allowable and disallowable list that I put on there on the 13th and posted online. That would suffice.
That's not actually what I'm saying, if I could. So the Department of Education does not need approval from the State Board of Education to make updates to an allowable list. So I'm not saying that by closing rulemaking, that means that you have to put the list up that you previously had, but I'll look to staff to see if I'm incorrect in that. I mean, we've never approved an allowed list before for the department. The department does it.
Executive Director, please.
President Ford, Lieutenant Warren, members of the board, Member Clark. We are researching, right? But the key issue, we did reach out to the department about the allowable and disallowable list. Honestly, it was about making sure it's searchable on the website and that following the letter of the rule. So it's less about the content of the list and more just about it needs to be easily navigated. Deputy Director Wonders, do you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Director Ross. For Superintendent Board members of the board, so just to clarify the question that's getting spoken to is about the requirement rule of the department establishing a database of approved expenses and disallowed expenses that is both available to parents online and disaggregated by the approved expenses by eligibility category in a searchable format. So I think the question that we had sent over to the department was whether or not the provisions on the website meet the requirements for those different features. It is not a insert expenses need to be included, rather it's format content.
Thank you. That's what I thought. And you had communicated that to me, Director Ross, just on the searchability piece. So I don't think I have any.
Superintendent.
Yes, Rashid, was it conveyed to you that under interpretation of the rule as it's written now, you would have to list hundreds of thousands of different items?
That was my understanding, but bringing this clarity now, I think we will have no problem with the rule the way we have it now. We just have to list out universal and the special needs. So I think we're okay.
That would be practically impossible for you to do that.
That might take 5 years and 30 people, I guess. And so I think it's with this direction here, I think what we posted and just making sure that it's searchable is you're in good standing. And thank you for your time. We're always here to help. Our leadership team is here today too.
Thank you. So with, let me clarify. We do have an amendment that's given the information you just received in Christine's comments. Is it your desire to withdraw the amendment that you brought?
We do what we do.
I think we're comfortable with that simply because of the new direction and clarification.
The second.
That's enforcement orders. That's your decisions for that, but I do believe the clarity provided today allows for the what the executive director or so.
So you do believe that
I do, yes.
then I'll withdraw the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or again, we have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions, or concerns for our call vote? Yeah, Member Hager.
I just had one question about the way the rules written around independent evaluations. In my way of thinking, adding some additional language in the statute into that rule would be helpful. So that's the question I have, and just might be.
For Executive Director Ross.
I didn't hear.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
My question was around the rule related to independent evaluations, and whether some additional language directly from the statute.
President Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, Deputy Director Wonders will identify the section to which Dr. Hager is referring and read the verbiage that is currently under question.
Second,
No pressure.
No, we're not.
President Core, Superintendent, board members of the board, I believe the section that Member Hagerman is speaking to is regarding the independent evaluation language contained in the draft. Rules, it's R7-2-1505. The current reading, the rule states pursuant to ARS 15-2403, the department shall accept independent educational evaluations that are obtained by the parent of the student, performed by the qualified examiner, qualified statute. Rule. I believe the issue Dr. Hagerman is speaking to is to mirror the language that is contained in House Bill 2853 and add the language beginning that for the purposes of educational therapies services, the department shall accept independent evaluations. That's correct. So for the purpose of what Dr. Hagerman is speaking to, the clarification that he was referencing is the language that will be contained in that bill that was passed on that specific section.
Does that mean with your satisfaction?
Aaron, could you restate the phrase again that is being proposed to be added to that?
Yes, so in the draft of the rule, so is that the portion highlighted in green?
Yep, I got it in front of me.
It would be after the first comma, so after the reference to ARS 15-243, it would say the department for the purposes of educational therapies and services shall accept independent evaluations. And I believe that tie is to the language that is in House Bill 2053 that Dr. Hager.
That clarified.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. And member Corvallis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I just have a technical question. So that evaluation would be assuming that there's already an ESA, but maybe there's a change in diagnosis or a change in additional therapies, that private evaluation can be accepted by the department, correct?
Yes, correct. The intent of the statutes and is to allow a private evaluation to be used to qualify a child to be able to use their ESA funds for special education therapies, things, which also could potentially increase their funding if they had a diagnosis. That's correct.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for, this legislative intent. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, with a motion and a second on the floor, I will call the question. All those in favor of closing rulemaking on the ESA, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Move us on to 6D, and just to tee this up a little bit, I believe Executive Director Ross, this was an action inadvertently left off our list from the previous month. So it is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the 2021-2022 ADAP accountability appeals. And again, there was an oversight. One school was left off list. And at this point, do I have a motion to deny the appeal application for Sentinel Elementary School due to not a valid ground for appeal, student characteristics, accountability formula, or appeal factor 2, and that no impact to the letter grade for appeal factor 1. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Bart, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Haley, thank you. Do I have any? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll ask all those in favor of denying the appeal to please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay, the appeal is denied unanimously. I'll move us on to 6E. This is the presentation, discussion, and discussion regarding educator discipline report. Executive Director Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Today, Jessica Mueller from Board of Staff will be presenting the educator discipline report. I just want to give a big thank you to Jessica, to Garnett Burns, and to the investigative team for their work on this report.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Ross, President Core, Superintendent Horn, and members. I just want to briefly go over some of the data that is in this report. This enforcement action report is provided every January. It includes the previous data from the previous year. So this would now include January 2022 through December 2022 enforcement actions that were taken by the board. So these are cases that are adjudicated. There are still cases that sit with the board's investigative unit that are not included in this report. So in 2022, the board adjudicated 172 cases. And we anticipate this to increase in 2023 through a third professional practices advisory committee being added, as well as the additional assistant attorney generals that were approved in the budget. The source of complaints remained highest, with 43% of the reports coming from school officials. And then DPS fingerprint clearance card violations report is 34% across the 2012 through 2022 numbers. In 2022, it is similar, however, the NASDAQ database entry hits were increasing, indicating that discipline in other states on the educator certificates is higher. There are no trends in the gender of the educator. However, across all of the data is 61% male overall. Out of the 12 certificate types, there are some that are just applying for the first time, as well as those that are non-certificated individuals, which just came under the board's jurisdiction through ARS 15505. This is new to the report this year and represents 1% of the cases from 2012 to 2022. However, it was 5% in the 2022 board adjudicated cases were from non-certificated individuals. Cases involving secondary certs were down in 2022, while the administrative certificates increased. The university may not represent that they were graduating from an educator preparation program, as Bruce Planty addressed earlier. Therefore, out of 529 cases, 25% did complete an EPP. And then for more recent data, there were 40% who have an education degree or completed a teacher preparation program. The largest category of cases remains sexual misconduct, representing about 55 cases per year. In 2022, breaches of contract increased, as well as substance-related cases, while the assault behaviors were down. Exhibit 11 on page 13 shows the category of the discipline by the type of certificate held, if you're interested in digging a little bit deeper into that. Sexual misconduct is most often associated with educators who have no certificate, a subject matter expert certificate, a career or technical education certificate, or a secondary certificate. While the assaults are more associated with educators who have no certificate, substitute, or special education certificate. Surrenders represent the majority of the type of discipline that the board approves. Surrenders are for 5 years and require case review upon reapplication. Suspensions and revocations follow. 25% of all cases are negotiated settlement agreements, ranging from a letter of censure on the educator certificate to a 5-year suspension or denial of the application for 5 years. In 2022, we heard the board voted on more surrenders than 2021, representing a 41% increase. The recommendations in the report include that training for school administrators, as well as the HR directors, as well as the development of free misconduct prevention training for educators. The non-certificated report data may expand in future years, as well as information that is now being collected on the negotiated settlement agreement violations. And then there was narrative added to the report on pages 17 through 19 relating to the 15505 definition of non-certificated individuals. Individuals who have not been employed in a district or charter school cannot have action taken against them. This may include private school educators, student teaching interns, and NASDAQ reported discipline for educators who have not yet worked in Arizona. The recommendation is to expand the definition of non-certificated to include any individual who selects education sponsor on their fingerprint clearance card application for the safety of Arizona's children in the classroom. Additionally, Dr. Clay, you addressed earlier involvement with the county superintendent. So in future years, I would like to indicate the county of the discipline, as well as provide that information to the county superintendents. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much, Jessica. Any questions, comments?
No questions, just a comment that this report is absolutely fantastic. So well done.
Member Haley.
There was just a reference, I think in the FY23 budget request, there'd be one new full-time hire to create the free curriculum Arizona-based training guide to prevent misconduct. When do you think that individual will be hired and brought on?
Yes, President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members, and Vice President Haley. That would be Director of Constituent Service in Shannon Etz. She was hired in part to just really communicate to the field and develop trainings that can support our schools as well as our parents and other school stakeholders.
Fantastic. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, and again, that was for information only. If I'm correct, there's no need for the board to formally accept it, but as referenced by Member Clark, I do it for the entire board, express my appreciation for the amazing work and the way it's laid out. It's just super informational. Thank you. Moving on to next item F, presentation and discussion regarding legislative affairs. The board may take action to support, oppose, or remain neutral on specific legislative proposals. And I think Executive Director, this is largely informational today also, but Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Corr, more members of the board, thank you so much. This will actually be addressed by Deputy Director Lewis.
Fantastic. Please.
President Corr, Superintendent, board members of the board. This item is a brief update on the legislative action that the board has taken so far. Just to start off with, the legislative committee's weekly committee meeting on the board. So far, meetings have been President Corr, Vice President Haley, Yanez, the director or the policy guru, and then Director Ross and myself. We've been discussing through the 2 meetings that we've had so far since I've been here, some of the pending actions, items that are coming up for hearing over to the legislature. So the 2 bills that have made it through either education committee mine. The board has not recommended a position on either of those. This upcoming week, there's still relatively low volume comparatively. About 8 bills moving through the committee. We'll be discussing those later today. There have been presentations at the legislature. Topics include school finance, school funding, general state funding, assessments, and then a particularly engaging presentation on community colleges by President Corr. The executive additionally has released their budget proposal for FY24 that was released the first Friday of session that followed the State of the State address that Monday. There was a joint appropriations hearing committee last week that reviewed the executive proposal. In terms of the board's operations, there are no significant changes that are in that proposal to board programs or operations. However, there are a number of other education items that were included in the executive proposal. In terms of legislative timeline, we're going into the third week of session. In general, there's 6 weeks to hear bills and standing committees, plus an extra week committee appropriations committee to meet. Again, it's been relatively low volume, especially compared to the past couple of years, so not as many pending pieces to discuss. At this time, we're not bringing any items to the board's discussion or consideration to take a position. However, I think certainly by our February meeting, we'll have a lot more to discuss on that front. But always happy to answer any questions, or if there's any items that you want to reach out to, happy to discuss.
Fantastic, Aaron. Any questions or comments for Deputy Director Wonders? Yeah,
Dr. Course, and board member of the board, just as a matter of process, we will be reaching out to board members with the election of member Haley as vice president. We will need another member of the board for the legislative committee, so we'll be reaching out in this week.
Excellent. Yeah, fantastic. All right. Yeah. Member Healy, did you?
I just was going to say it's a fun committee.
We can bring a little fun to it. Yeah, that's true. Thank you very much. So I'll move us on to next call. This is the call to the public. So again, this is the call to the public to comment on items on today's consent agenda for enforcement actions. As consistent with earlier, all speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Executive Director Ross, do we have any folks who want to chat with us?
For the board, members of the board, there are no speakers at this time.
Okay, very good. So I'll move us on to the consent agenda for enforcement actions. If it meets with the approval of the board, it would be my desire to take this consent agenda as a single motion. With hearing no objection to that, do I have a motion to approve items 8A1 through 8A21, B1 and 2, C1 and 2, and D1 and 2, and E1? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Haley, thank you very much. Any conversation, discussion, concerns? Hearing none, I will call a vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move us on to the next call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's enforcement action general session. Again, all speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Executive Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Dr. Course, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have received requests to speak. Up first is going to be Jeff Larona.
President Core, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. This is very unfamiliar territory for me. Usually PPAC makes a recommendation to the board, and the board, whether it accepts it or rejects it. This is a unique circumstance that the PPAC did not make any recommendation at all as it pertains to my client, Mr. Bayhan. I would like the board to consider the fact that no CPS action was ever taken against Mr. Bayhan with respect to any of his children. One of the children that was the subject of an incident that occurred relative to a hairbrush, he ultimately obtained custody of her, has custody of her, and it was awarded by CPS out of California. He has good standing as a teacher now in the Casa Grande High School. He's teaching Spanish and has done so for 3 years. Subsequent to the hearing, a couple of the PPAC committee members recommended a letter of censure with anger management counseling. Mr. Bayhan has enrolled his children in counseling. He is also participating in counseling. He is also participating in anger management. He's been proactive since that period of time. We're going to be urging the board to recommend that he receive a letter of censure and that he be ordered to complete anger management counseling. PPAC was all over the place on this one. We had
two PPAC committee members recommending revocation due to the fact that my client did not notify the board that his license had been taken away permanently in the state of California. We referred to the consent agreement that he entered into with the Attorney General relative to that, where it said that basically that action only pertained to California. He was not represented by counsel in Arizona, and he did not at that point feel that he had to report and wasn't advised by any counsel that he had to report. One board member was concerned about the act, one committee member was concerned about the action that had happened in California relative to the brush incident involving one of his daughters. That's a daughter that he now has custody of, and he was awarded custody of out of the state of California. There was another board member, a committee member that recommended a 3-year suspension, but nobody could even agree on the 3-year suspension. And two committee members recommended letter of censure with anger management counseling, which we're urging the board to do with respect to Mr. Bayhan. And unless the board has any questions, I have nothing further to say.
Thank you very much. I believe we'll address this issue in B. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is that the only?
Yes.
I just want to disclose that Jess Rowan is a former law partner of mine, and although it goes back a number of years, for the purpose of appearance, I'll abstain on this issue.
We'll actually call just call the public. We will call the vote in B. But thank you.
Thank you.
Reference that when you see me together. Was that the only request to speak under this call for the public?
Dr. Kors and members of the board, we have 4 more speakers.
Oh, okay, very good.
Up next is Joshua Bayan.
Good afternoon. I would just like to start off saying the difficult day for me to be here. We had a scare at our school. I teach at Casa Grande, and I feel I showed up first period today, and many of my students were missing because we had a gun scare at school on Thursday, and really bad that I'm not there to be able to support my students. They were asking me as I was leaving why I was leaving. I didn't want them to think that I was abandoning them. I'd like to address what Mr. Lorona said. I have enrolled my children and myself in family counseling and individual counseling with anger management. I've been teaching at Casa Grande for the past 3 years. This is my 3rd year, and I feel very fortunate to be teaching there. It's a different environment, and I would like the board to understand that these allegations that have been made, this is from a contested custody dispute between my ex-wife and I. And I have been awarded custody of my youngest 3 boys, not just my daughter. So I've been awarded custody of all 4 children, and I've that was with CPS involvement, Child Protective Services in California. They wrote me a very strongly worded recommendation that I believe is part of the documents you have. And it mentioned if I hadn't sought custody of my boys and my daughter, that they were going to remove them from the home they were in. So I would just like the committee to consider the circumstances of these allegations and the outcome of the CPS and DCS involvement. CPS in California and the Department of Child Services here in Arizona have been intimately involved in this, and I do have main custody and decision making of my children after all of these investigations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Kathleen Brumkingham from the Attorney General's office.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the Arizona State Board of Education. I'm Assistant Attorney General of Kathleen Brantingham, and I've represented the state through all of the Bayhan proceedings. You just heard from Mr. Larona, Mr. Bayhan's attorney, and Mr. Bayhan. I have a very short time to detail distill the essence of more than 10 hours of hearing and a 600-page, actually 600+ page record in this matter. So I'll do my best to suggest where you should direct your focus as you consider this matter. I know you have a couple of options before you. It is the state's position that this board should review the entirety of the record before you, then adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law, which were accepted by the PPAC with one exception. And that is that the PPAC voted to accept as a mitigating factor that there was an absence of a prior discipline record. That's factually inaccurate. Mr. Bayhan was under investigation by the California Commission on Teacher Certificate Credentialing, and to settle that investigation, he self-revoked in California his teaching certificate, and he agreed that he would not apply for another California credential in his lifetime. This hearing was not typical of a PPAC hearing. I'll agree with Mr. Larona in that. It was not typical in terms of length or number of witnesses. The state presented 6 witnesses because I wanted the PPAC members to be able to hear their stories firsthand and evaluate their demeanor as they testified. You're free to watch the videotapes of those witnesses' testimony too. The state's first witness was 19-year-old child D, who testified that he was a victim of sexual abuse by his father when he was 5 years old. The state's second witness was Amy Cam, the mother of the 9 Bayhan children and the former wife of Mr. Bayhan. Ms. Cam testified to learning about Mr. Bayhan's sexual abuse of 2 of their children and other instances of physical abuse by her former husband. The state's third witness was Rosemary Kodak, an investigator for the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing with 28 years of law enforcement experience. Investigator Kodak interviewed Child P, Child G, and Child D. She testified that she believed all 3 children were truthful in their statements to her, and in her interactions with Ms. Campon, she did not observe any efforts to have the children present false allegations against their father. The state's fourth witness was Arizona State Board of Education Investigative Unit Investigator Scott Reuter, who testified that Mr. Bayhan willfully failed to disclose that he voluntarily self-revoked his California teaching certificate and that he was barred from seeking another certificate in California for the rest of his life. The state's fifth witness was Maren Anderson, the 22-year-old daughter of Mr. Bayhan and his former wife. Ms. Anderson testified to witnessing the hairbrush incident when her father threw a hairbrush so hard it gashed the child's cheek. Ms. Anderson also testified to witnessing an incident when Mr. Bayhan picked up and violently shook her younger brother, Child R. Ms. Anderson testified to events she witnessed while Mr. Bayhan was teaching at the high school she attended. Ms. Anderson specifically denied that her mother coerced her to write any declaration for legal proceedings or to coach her to provide false testimony to the PPAC. The state's sixth witness was 24-year-old Morgan Bayhan, the oldest child of Mr. Bayhan and his former wife. Morgan testified that he and his siblings lived in fear of imminent violent outbursts or actions by their father. He testified to incidents in which his father also acted unprofessionally at the high school he attended and where his father taught. Like his sister Maren, Morgan specifically denied that his mother coached him to lie to the PPAC or to provide false testimony in any other legal proceeding. The state believes there are 4 factual bases on which discipline should be assessed against Mr. Bayhan's certificate. First, Mr. Bayhan sexually molested 2 of his adopted children. Second, Mr. Bayhan physically assaulted his own children on several occasions, notably the hairbrush incident in which the hairbrush was thrown so hard that it became embedded in the child's cheek like a cactus, and an incident in which he violently shook his young son. Third, and significantly, Mr. Bayhan misrepresented the facts of the California discipline proceedings when he applied for his Arizona certificate and responded to Investigator Reuter. A fair view of the record and the exhibits from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing shows that California was at all times seeking a revocation of Mr. Bain's certificate to bar him from California's classrooms forever. Fourth, Mr. Bain acted unprofessionally when he was teaching at Etna High School in California, as testified to by two of his oldest children and now adult children. Whether taken together or in any combination, these four factual bases for discipline warrant revocation of Mr. Bain's Arizona certificate. Today, we're here because the PPAC panel, which was the hearing body, could not agree on what would be the appropriate level of discipline to be assessed against Mr. Bain. PPAC did, however, agree on the findings of fact and conclusions of law. The state would assert that those facts, other than the erroneous mitigated fact that he had no prior discipline, plus the totality of the hearing record, provide more than sufficient basis for this board to conclude that Mr. Bain's certificate should be revoked. The full record is before this board. If these proceedings are delayed for any reason, Mr. Bain can continue, as he has, teaching Arizona school children for the months it would take to rehear the case or to further review this already ample record. For the reasons expressed earlier and based on the totality of the record in this matter, it's the state's recommendation that the State Board of Education today enter an order to revoke Mr. Bain's Arizona teaching certificate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kors, members of the board. Up next, we have Edmundo Urbina.
For Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My name is Edmundo Urbina, here on behalf of Leora Seidelman. I only want to speak if you have any questions with regard to that matter. The state and Seidelman have agreed to a letter of censure and of course, I really only need to say anything if you have questions about the matter.
Good. Thank you. We normally wouldn't engage in questions, but thank you for being here.
Dr. Kors, and board. Up next, we have Sarah Stark.
Executive Director Ross, Sarah Stark has not joined the meeting today.
Thank you, Jessica. Then up next would be Juan Bilbao.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Please go ahead.
My name is Juan Villafañe. I have a DUI on the last April 2022. I already complete 16 hours to my DUI education through alternative consulting service. And in August, I successfully complete the MAD online victim panel. I already did everything that core assignment for this matter. I complete 8 hours for traffic survival school approved by Arizona Department Motor Vehicle. So today I want to prove my agreement to take the class for return my teacher certification.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Did that complete
Dr. Kors, that concludes the speakers section.
Okay, then I will move us on to A. These are presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the negotiated settlement agreements. That if there are no objections from the members, I'd like to take this as a single item. Do I have a motion to approve items 10A1 to 10A5? So, Member Catanese, thank you. Do I have a second? Dr. Clay, thank you. Any comments or discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of approval, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Approved unanimously. Thank you. So I'll move us on to 10B. This is uncharted territory, at least in my 6 years sitting on the board. We have never had a case come to us from PPAC that did not have a recommendation. We've heard from really both sides, including the state. I'll turn it over to Executive Director Ross, who has some kind of teed up as to our options and how we got here and maybe where we go next, please.
Thank you, Dr. Cork. Dr. Cork, Superintendent Warren, members of the board. This complaint case was heard by the PPAC on August 28, 2022 and November 8, 2022. The PPAC members established findings of fact and conclusions of law, but were unable to come to a consensus disciplinary recommendation. Today, you heard from the state's attorney and from Jeff Lorona, representing Educator Bayan, we responded to our council. The conclusion of the attorney's presentation, the board members have the following options. Number one, remand the case back to the same PPAC panel to rehear the case. Number two, remand the case back to a different PPAC to rehear the case. Number three, firm, adopt, modify, supplement, or reject the findings of fact and conclusions of law and issue a final order. For its final order, the board may consider any of the following disciplinary action: letter of censure, suspension of the certificate, suspension of the certificates with conditions imposed, or revocation.
Thank you, Executive Director Ross. So again, I'd love to, I'll open it up to hear the desire of the board. Remanding the case back to the exact same PPAC strikes me as the definition of insanity. And hope for a different result. So I'm open to any conversation, but really I think we have an option of remanding it back. I would hope to, I'm not speaking just for myself, a different PPAC, or taking some action based on what we've heard and read and witnessed in our package. So with that, I'll turn it open. I'll open the floor and see who would like to chime in. Yeah, Member Clark, please.
So we're just having conversation now. I should not do a motion. Is that correct? Dr. Ross?
So this portion would be discussion in which a motion could be suggested by a member, but this is the discussion that we should go on. Thank you.
So I would like to suggest a motion that we reject the findings of facts and conclusions of law from the PPAC, and that we would issue a revocation of the license of Mr. Joshua Bayan.
I have a motion on the floor that calls for the revocation of Educator Bayan's license. Do I have a second? And then we'll have a conversation. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Member Haley, second. Conversation, thoughts? Go ahead, Dr. Haley.
A technical question, would it be adjusting the findings of facts as opposed to rejecting them?
So Dr. Core, Superintendent Warren, members of the board, Dr. Hagerman, I was just in conversation with Attorney General Lou Caputo, and they would not be rejecting the findings of fact of law.
Lou, if you could you, I think the intent, and you'll speak to your intent much better than I is to ultimately seek the revocation of the license and are looking for a venue to do so.
That is correct.
Okay, Lou, can you talk us through that?
Dr. Corey, I suggest executive session to do that.
Oh,
for legal advice. That's personally, it seems another legal question aspect. Okay.
Is it possible for me to adjust my motion?
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Horn, members of the board, member Clark, yes, that is possible for you to adjust your motion.
So Member Clark, you're recognized with a alteration to your initial motion.
So I would like to move that we issue a revocation of the teaching certificate of Joshua Bayan.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. Now other conversation, discussion, Member Kervakis.
Just a technical
And then
question.
Dr. Clay.
Just a technical question as the board. If I want to make sure I say it right too.
Yeah.
If I remember what the Attorney General's office just said, it was potentially accepting the findings of fact of the PPAC with the one exception. Was that correct? There's one, the discipline that she said was an incorrect.
Yes.
Dr. Course and our call Kathy Cunningham back out. Yeah, that question from the attorney general.
Yeah, please.
Maybe I can clarify this. The PPAC did vote to accept the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law that was submitted by the state. Within our kind of template for that proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law, there's a section that has mitigating factors and aggravating factors. Now, there's some options there for them to pick, and one of the mitigating factors that they picked was the absence of disciplinary records. I think that's factually inaccurate, as Mr. Bayhan was disciplined in California. He self-revoked his certificate, and he is barred from seeking another certificate in California. So the findings of fact and conclusions of law that they voted on, were provided by the state. I think that they are accurate, with the exception of that one mitigating factor. I would suggest that you omit.
So, Mr. President, to that, thank you for that clarification, but as far as motion, do we need to address that factor, or do we just?
Dr. Corsick and more members of the board, there would need to be a motion to adjust the findings of fact and conclusion as described by Attorney Assistant Attorney General Birmingham.
So then I mean, this is quite unprecedented, but we're going to try that again. So the desired motion again to meet the interest of the motion on the floor, but I want to obviously satisfy our legal protocol and requirement is the motion would be to adjust the findings of facts and findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations to the Professional Practices Advisory Committee with the omission as noted by State Council and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and recommend the revocation of the license of Educator Bayhan. Member Clark, does that meet with your interest in that motion?
It does.
Member Haley, does it meet with your interest in seconding that motion?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now I will once again, I don't do this for a living. This is my day job. So trying to work through this and do it right. So with that, are there additional comments or okay, Dr. Clay, I think you were next, and then Member Myers.
I think she.
Okay, fair enough.
I appreciate Member Clark's motion and question on sort of process also. And compelled by the Attorney General's statement of having to go through another process, given obviously some information that she shared. Is there an option for, obviously the PPAC structure is designed to sort of adjudicate this or review all of the data presented on both sides. Is there an option where we could have a thought, like there's a revocation pending a second, I agree with you to not send back to the original PPAC, but a revocation pending the result of another PPAC's analysis. So to get at the Attorney General's comment, I'm just kind of curious on that as any sort of compromise between Member Clark's comments or potential motion and
Thank you, Member Myerson has researched and expressed to us that revocation pending a rehearing was not an option available to the board. We worked this through, and those options presented to us of original new feedback for this board making a decision. But thank you, Dr. Klein.
I have a comment and a question. What concerns me is that it took PAC how long to get this done, or not to get this done? How long was the process?
Dr. Clay, Superintendent Warren, Dr. Core members of the board, actually I would call Garnett Burns to answer that question and with staff.
Thank you, Garnett. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Dr. Core, Member Clay, your question was how long did they deliberate this case?
Yes.
In total, it was 10.5 hours.
Okay. Over 2 weeks. Okay, yeah, that's what I was.
Over 2 days, correct. Yeah, so we started about noon on the first day because of the other cases we heard. And then we finished it on the second day, which was 2 months later.
Thank you. Thank you. Well.
Oh, wait, okay.
My concern is it took them all the time to do what they did to make that decision, and then we're trying to make that decision right away. I will go, and I'm just trying to understand the group because I think collectively we're wise. That's why we're talking back and forth, and I'm not against or for anything. Right now, I'm just asking the questions. And the concern is, can we as a board make that decision where it takes, we had people who were professionals or, well, not professionals, they took a lot of time doing this, and then we're going to take just a couple of minutes to do that. Is that, I don't know if that's appropriate or not. It may be, because there might be things that I don't know or I don't understand. So Member Clark and members of the board, not saying anything, negative. I read this book called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, and it's just a question. Would we feel comfortable doing that? And because the process took that long, and now we're saying, okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and make that decision. Or should we consider putting it to another PPAC? And if we do that, will that teacher be pulled from the classroom during the time? So he would still be?
No.
Okay, so.
So there's no, because I think that's maybe the crux of where there's a concern of, at least on my end of, I think I would be in favor of having another PPAC look at it. That's the process of the superintendent, but I do also have concern with,
yes,
educator continuing in the classroom. And so wondering if there's some way to rectify those two things.
Yeah, and that's how I ended up with kind of this 2 or 3 page script, because we understand what the options are before of us, and as well thought out and as well reasoned as that is. My understanding is that it's not an option. Other thoughts? Yes, we do have a motion that is seconded. I'll ask for one more chance for conversation.
I just want to make sure there weren't any other questions or anything that anyone wanted. I think we're good. I just.
Okay. All right, then I will call the question. The motion is to adjust the findings of fact, conclusional line recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee with the omissions suggested by the Attorney General, and revoke the license of Educator Bayhand. That is the motion before us. All those in favor of supporting that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Thank you so much, Superintendent. If you want to express your abstention.
I abstain for the reasons previously stated.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the reminder. Motion passes. Thank you very much for the considered conversation. I'm going to move us on to NC. Presentation, discussion, of possible action, findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendation of professional practices advisory committee to suspend the certificates of Parker Beatty, case number C 2021-012273 for a period of 3 years. Do I have a motion to approve the findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendations of the PFAC to suspend the certificate Parker Beatty, case number C 2021-012273 for a period of 3 years? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark, thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Dr. Hagerman, any conversation or discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 10D, presentation and discussion of possible action on the findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Todd Cheeseman, case number C 2021-012782 for a period of 5 years. Do I have a motion to approve the findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Todd Cheeseman, case number C 2021-012782 for a period of 5 years? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Haley, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Clay, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to E, 10E, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendation of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the teaching certificates of Mark Iwi, case number C 2021-012968 for a period of 2 years. Do I have a motion to approve the findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendation of the Professional Advisory Committee to suspend the certificates of Mark Iwi, case number C 2021-012968? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Hagerman, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Kravitz, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Move us on to the next item, 10F, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, inclusion of law and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificate for a period of 5 years of Stephanie Boss, case number C 2022-000558. Again, that being for a period of 5 years. Yeah, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the findings of fact, conclusion of the law and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee and revoke the certificates of Stephanie Boss, case number C 2022-000558? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Haley, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Cantonese, thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. And moving us on to item H, this is just a summary of any current events for the good of the order from any member of the board. Are there any closing comments or announcements anyone would like to make? Executive Director Ross. Thank you. How about that? Well, with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 1:20. and which I want to, thank you.